I stand in my grandmother's Victorian house, holding the deed with trembling hands. The will reading ended an hour ago, leaving my sister Madison storming out in fury. My father's words echo in my mind. Sign it over to your sister. She needs it more. But I clutch the sealed envelope my grandmother's lawyer handed me, privately marked, "For Holly," when they pressure you. I know opening it will change everything. 10 years of Sunday visits, 10 years of being the only grandchild who cared, and now this moment of truth arrives. The weight of that deed brings me back to when it all began, 10 years ago when I was 22. Fresh out of college with my marketing degree, I'd landed my first real job at a startup downtown. Life was rushing forward at breakneck speed, but something made me call Grandma Rose that September afternoon. Holly dear, what a wonderful surprise." Her voice had wavered slightly through the phone, and I heard something I'd never noticed before. Loneliness. That Sunday, I drove the 40 minutes from my cramped studio apartment to her Victorian house in Riverside Heights. The pale yellow home with its wraparound porch had been in our family for 3 generations. Grandma opened the door before I could knock, her silver hair pinned up the same way she'd worn it my entire life, but her blue eyes seemed dimmer somehow. "I brought groceries," I announced, holding up bags from the local market. "Thought we could cook lunch together like when I was little." The smile that spread across her face could have powered the entire neighborhood. We spent that afternoon making her famous pot roast, and she told me stories about Grandpa William I'd never heard before. How he'd proposed 5 times before she said yes. How they'd saved for 2 years to buy this house in 1971. How he'd planted the oak tree in the front yard the day my father was born. That single visit turned into an unbreakable tradition. Every Sunday without fail, I'd make that drive. Rain or shine, exhausted from work or energized by success, nothing stopped me from showing up at noon sharp. We developed our own rhythm. First, I'd check her refrigerator and make a grocery list. Then we'd cook together while she shared family history. After lunch, we'd tend her garden or organize photo albums or simply sit on the porch swing watching the neighborhood children play. Madison, my sister, who was 3 years older, always had excuses. The first few weeks, she claimed hangovers from Saturday nights out with friends. Then it became conflicting plans with whatever boyfriend occupied her attention that month. By the time the holidays rolled around, she'd stopped pretending to care. "Your sister called Grandma, mentioned one December Sunday as we decorated sugar cookies, said she might stop by for Christmas." She didn't. Instead, Madison sent a text on Christmas Eve saying she'd decided to go skiing in Colorado with her latest boyfriend. I found Grandma sitting alone by her tree that morning, still in her good dress, a plate of cookies, waiting on the coffee table. Specific Sundays burned themselves into my memory. The April afternoon when a thunderstorm knocked out power and Grandma gripped my hand, confessing she'd been terrified of storms since Grandpa died. We lit candles, and I told her funny stories from work until the lights returned. The blazing hot July day when we planted tomatoes in her backyard garden, both of us covered in dirt and laughing when the sprinkler accidentally soaked us. The October Sunday when I taught her to use the smartphone I'd bought her, watching her face light up when she successfully sent her first text message. "You're very patient with an old woman," she said that day, successfully typing out a message with her arthritis-gnarled fingers. "You're not old Grandma, you're vintage like your house, classic and valuable." Winter Sundays meant baking projects that filled the house with cinnamon and vanilla. Spring Sundays meant clearing flower beds and planting annuals. Summer Sundays meant iced tea on the porch and stories about the neighborhood's history. Fall Sundays meant raking leaves and making apple cider from scratch. Through it all, Madison's absence grew more pronounced. She'd surface for major holidays, breezing in with expensive wine and stories about her latest job interview or business idea. She'd stay just long enough to compliment Grandma's cooking hint about her financial struggles and disappear again. One February Sunday, while organizing the pantry, I discovered something that shifted my entire perspective. Hidden behind canned goods sat a leather journal, its pages filled with Grandma's careful handwriting. January 15th. One entry read, Madison called asking for money again, $2,000 for rent. I told her I'd already helped last month. She hung up on me. March 3rd. Holly came even though she had the flu, insisted on making me soup. Madison hasn't visited since Thanksgiving. June 21st. Holly's birthday. Madison forgot again. Holly brought me flowers saying visiting me was gift enough. Page after page documented every visit, every absence, every broken promise. But what struck me most were the unsent letters tucked between pages, all addressed to Madison. My dear granddaughter, one began, I wonder if you remember the summers you spent here as a child, how you'd help me make jam and we'd sell it at the farmer's market. You were so proud counting the dollars, planning what to buy. When did that eager little girl become someone who only calls when she needs something? I love you still, but love shouldn't hurt this much. I carefully returned the journal to its hiding spot, understanding flooding through me. Grandma had been documenting everything, not from bitterness, but from heartbreak. She'd been waiting, hoping Madison would remember the grandmother who'd helped raise her, who'd been there for every school play and soccer game. But Madison never came, and I never stopped showing up. Those Sunday visits became the cornerstone of my week. Friends would invite me to brunch, and I'd decline. Sorry, Sunday is Grandma Day. Boyfriends would suggest weekend trips, and I'd counter with, we can leave Sunday evening. Even when I got promoted and work demands intensified, those 40-minute drives remained sacred. Because somewhere between bringing groceries and sharing stories, between planting flowers and baking cookies, Grandma Rose had become more than my grandmother. She'd become my best friend, my confidant, my anchor in an increasingly chaotic world, and I'd become something to her too, though I wouldn't fully understand what, until that lawyer handed me a sealed envelope marked with my name. 6 months before Grandma passed, I noticed the small changes. She'd repeat questions she'd asked 5 minutes earlier. She'd forget where she placed her reading glasses while they rested on her head. She'd start stories about Grandpa and trail off mid-sentence, confusion clouding her features. Grandma, when's your next doctor's appointment? I asked one Sunday while washing dishes. Oh, I don't know, dear. Tuesday, Thursday, I wrote it down somewhere. I found appointment cards scattered throughout the house some months old. That evening, I called her physician, Dr. Patricia Henley, and arranged to accompany Grandma to her next visit. The following Wednesday, I took a personal day from work. Grandma seemed surprised when I arrived. Holly, but it's not Sunday. We have your checkup with Dr. Henley. Remember, I'm driving you. In the sterile medical office, Grandma gripped my hand during the cognitive tests. Simple questions became mountains. What year was it? Who was the current president? Count backward from 100 by sevens. With each stumbled answer, her fingers tightened around mine. Dr. Henley delivered the diagnosis with practiced gentleness. Mrs. Whitman, the tests indicate early-stage dementia, likely Alzheimer's. We'll start medication that might slow the progression, but you'll need support. The word hung in the air like a death sentence. Dementia. I watched Grandma's face crumble, then rebuild itself with forced composure. Well, she said finally, I suppose that explains why I keep losing my grocery lists. In the car afterward, she stared out the window at familiar streets that would soon become foreign. Don't tell your father yet, she whispered, or Madison, please. Grandma, promise me, Holly, I need time to think. I promised, though the weight of that secret pressed against my chest. Over the following weeks, I quietly rearranged my life. I spoke with my boss, transitioning to remote work 3 days a week. I researched memory care facilities, though each glossy brochure made my stomach turn. I interviewed home health aides looking for someone who'd treat Grandma with dignity, not pity. The first time my parents visited after the diagnosis, I bit my tongue until it nearly bled. They stayed exactly 45 minutes. My mother Linda walked through the house with an appraising eye, commenting on the dated wallpaper and inefficient kitchen layout. My father Robert mainly scrolled through his phone occasionally, glancing up to nod at whatever Grandma said. "This place is too big for her," Linda announced as if Grandma wasn't sitting right there. "Robert, we should talk to that real estate agent friend of yours. These old Victorians are selling well right now." "Mother's not selling," I interjected, my voice sharp enough to cut glass. Linda's perfectly penciled eyebrows rose. "Holly, be practical. A nice assisted living facility would be perfect. They have activities, medical staff?" I said no. The tension crackled until Grandma spoke. "I'm staying in my home. Holly's helping me arrange things." My parents exchanged glances I recognized from childhood, the kind that preceded lectures about disappointment and poor judgment. But they left without arguing further, Robert muttering about stubborn women as they walked to their car. Madison's contribution came in the form of a get-well card 2 weeks later. Store-bought generic with a pre-printed message about hoping you feel better soon. She'd signed it simply M and tucked a lottery ticket inside. I found Grandma staring at it one afternoon, tears sliding down her cheeks. "She used to make me cards," she whispered, drew pictures of rainbows and flowers. "When did she stop?" I had no answer that wouldn't break her heart further. By November, I depleted my savings account. The part-time aide Jennifer cost $500 a week. Medications ate another $300 monthly. Modified bathroom fixtures for safety, grab bars, a medical alert system, each expense necessary, each one carving away at my financial stability. I moved into the guest room the night Grandma wandered outside at 2 a.m. A neighbor found her in her nightgown watering flowers in the freezing rain. After that, I couldn't leave her alone overnight. My apartment sat empty while I slept on an air mattress that deflated slightly each night, waking up closer to the floor than when I'd fallen asleep. My marketing job suffered. Conference calls interrupted by Grandma's confusion. Presentations cobbled together at 3 a.m. after she finally settled. My supervisor showed patience initially, then concern, then frustration. I stopped caring about promotions or annual reviews. What mattered was Grandma recognizing my face each morning, the way relief flooded her features when she saw me. "You're my true granddaughter," she said one December morning, gripping my hand with surprising strength. "The others share blood, but you share heart." I documented everything in my own journal. The good days when she remembered entire recipes and laughed at old jokes. The hard days when she called me by my mother's name or asked when Grandpa was coming home. The terrifying days when she didn't recognize the house she'd lived in for 50 years. Jennifer proved worth every penny I didn't have. A retired nurse in her 50s, she treated Grandma with gentle respect, never talking down or rushing. She'd arrive at 8 each morning, freeing me to work, though I rarely left the house. We developed a routine that provided structure to increasingly chaotic days. 3 months into our new arrangement, I discovered Grandma had been busier than her declining memory suggested. While filing Medicare paperwork in her study, I found a manila folder labeled Legal Documents in shaky handwriting. Inside, power of attorney forms naming someone I didn't expect, Mr. Gregory Brennan, her estate lawyer. A sticky note in Grandma's writing explained, "Robert and Linda tried to force this last month, said I needed family to handle affairs. Mr. Brennan has my instructions. Don't let them take control, Holly." The forms were dated 6 weeks prior during one of her clear periods. Attached was a letter from Mr. Brennan confirming he'd accepted the responsibility and would act according to her documented wishes. Relief washed through me, followed immediately by anger. My parents had tried to gain control without telling me, probably hoping to start liquidating assets before Grandma even needed serious care. But Grandma, even with her mind betraying her, had outsmarted them. She'd protected herself, and I would later learn protected me too. Those legal documents were just the beginning of what she'd put in place during her moments of clarity, building a fortress of paperwork against the storm she saw coming. February arrived with a blizzard that trapped us inside for 3 days. Grandma's confusion deepened with the isolation, the white landscape outside her windows, erasing familiar landmarks. She kept asking to go home while sitting in her own living room. "I want to go home," she repeated, plucking at the quilt I'd wrapped around her shoulders. "William will worry if I'm late." "You are home, Grandma. This is your house. Grandpa William, he's waiting for you here." Jennifer had warned me about this phase where past and present tangled like fishing line. I learned to enter her reality rather than force her into mine. If she thought Grandpa was coming for dinner, I'd set his place at the table. If she believed she was late for teaching school, I'd assure her it was Saturday. The heartbreak came in waves, watching her struggle to remember how to use a fork, finding her trying to water artificial plants, discovering she'd hidden money in books because the banks aren't safe, then forgetting which books held bills. But between the fog, moments of crystalline clarity emerged. One March evening, while I read Grandpa's love letters aloud, she suddenly gripped my wrist. Holly?" She said my name sharp and certain. "I need you to get something, the wooden box in the attic, behind the Christmas decorations. Bring it now while I remember." I raced up the narrow attic stairs, dust motes dancing in the fading light. Behind boxes marked Xmas Ornaments 1987 sat an ornate wooden box I'd never seen. Carved roses decorated its lid, and a small gold lock secured its contents. Back in her room, Grandma produced a key from her nightstand. Her hands shook as she opened the box, revealing documents that would change everything. "Property deeds," she explained, her voice steady despite her trembling fingers. "Bank statements, investment accounts, and this." She pulled out a handwritten will dated just 3 weeks earlier. "Mr. Brennan came during a good day. Jennifer witnessed. Everything legal." I scanned the will's contents, my eyes widening. The house to me. The investment accounts I hadn't known existed to me. A small bequest to Madison. Nothing for my parents. "Grandma, this is fair," she finished. "You've been my daughter in all but birth. Madison," her voice cracked, "I found the photos." From the box, she withdrew printed screenshots from the nanny cam she'd had installed. Madison, clear as day, taking money from Grandma's purse. Multiple occasions, different days. Always when she thought no one was watching. "She took more than money," Grandma whispered. "She took my faith in her. But you, Holly, you gave me faith in goodness. This house will be yours. Promise me you'll fill it with love, not greed." I promised through tears, helping her lock the box and hide it in my room. Over the following weeks, during her clear moments, she shared more secrets. The combination to a safe behind a painting, the location of savings bonds, contact information for a financial advisor who'd helped her invest Grandpa's life insurance payout. "Your parents don't know," she confided one afternoon while Jennifer prepared lunch. "They think I'm a poor old widow living on Social Security. Let them keep thinking that." Working remotely became impossible as Grandma needed constant attention. I officially took unpaid leave, watching my bank account dwindle while maxing out credit cards. Jennifer increased her hours, and I hired a weekend aide named Patricia. Between them and me, Grandma had round-the-clock care. We developed new rituals adapted to her declining abilities. Instead of cooking together, I'd narrate while preparing meals, letting her smell spices and taste sauces. Instead of gardening, we'd sit by windows watching birds at the feeders I'd installed. Instead of organizing photos, I created a simplified album with large pictures labeled in bold print: Holly, granddaughter; William, husband. This is your home. Madison surfaced once during this period, appearing on a Thursday afternoon without warning. I was upstairs grabbing clean clothes when I heard Jennifer's raised voice. "Ma'am, you can't just take that." I flew downstairs to find Madison shoving Grandma's jewelry box into her designer purse. "What are you doing?" I demanded. Madison's face cycled through surprise guilt and finally defiance. "Getting what's mine. Grandma promised me her pearl necklace years ago. Grandma's sleeping. You didn't even say hello to her." "She won't remember anyway." Madison's casual cruelty stole my breath. "Besides, I need something to pawn. Rent's due." "Get out!" "Excuse me." "Get out!" I stepped forward, my exhaustion crystallizing into rage. "And leave the jewelry box." Madison slammed it on the hall table, pearls scattering across the floor. "You've poisoned her against me. When she dies, I'll contest everything." After she left, I found Grandma awake, tears on her cheeks. She'd heard everything. "I'm sorry," I whispered, gathering scattered pearls. "Don't apologize for truth, dear one. Just don't let her come back. I can't bear it anymore." April brought a final gift of clarity. Grandma woke one morning completely lucid, asking for pancakes and coffee like any other Sunday from our past. We spent the day looking through wedding albums, her memory sharp as she recalled details about flowers, music, guests who'd attended 60 years ago. "Holly," she said as afternoon faded, "I need to tell you something important. In the safe, there's an envelope marked for Holly when they come. Don't open it until they pressure you, and they will. Robert will make it about family duty. Linda will cry. Madison will rage. But you'll know when to open it." That evening, as confusion crept back in, she held my hand with surprising strength. "You were my Sunday blessing. Every week, no matter what. You were my reminder that love isn't just words, but showing up." Those became the last fully coherent words she spoke to me. The following weeks blurred together. Good moments grew rarer. She stopped recognizing Jennifer, then Patricia, but somehow even in the deepest fog she knew me. My voice could calm her agitation. My presence could ease her fear. I existed on coffee and determination, learning to interpret her needs through gestures and expressions. Jennifer taught me how to maintain dignity while providing intimate care. Patricia showed me how to redirect anxiety without medication. Together, we created a cocoon of safety in the Victorian house that had sheltered 4 generations of family. The wooden box remained hidden in my room, its contents a promise of battles to come. But in those final months, I pushed thoughts of inheritance aside. What mattered was holding Grandma's hand through the long nights, reading Grandpa's letters until my voice grew hoarse, playing her favorite songs from the 40s on repeat, making sure she felt loved every single day, even if she couldn't remember why. Because that's what family really meant. Not shared blood or legal documents, but showing up when showing up was hard, sacrificing when sacrifice hurt, loving when love demanded everything you had to give. Madison. Never visited again. My parents called occasionally, their questions always practical. How much longer? What about the house? Had I looked into facilities? They never asked how Grandma felt or how I was managing or if we needed help. But I had Sunday memories to sustain me. 10 years of conversations and cookies gardens and gossip lessons about marriage and life and resilience. Those Sundays had prepared me for these brutal months, teaching me that love wasn't just a feeling, but a choice you made again and again, especially when choosing became difficult. Grandma passed on a Thursday morning in May as spring flowers bloomed outside her bedroom window. Jennifer and I were both with her, holding her hands as her breathing slowed then stopped. The morning sun cast golden light across her face, and I swear she looked younger, like the woman in her wedding photos finally reunited with her William. I'd thought I was prepared. After months of decline, death seemed almost merciful, but the silence that followed her last breath hollowed me out. The house felt impossibly empty, despite Jennifer's presence, as if Grandma's spirit had been the only thing keeping the walls standing. Jennifer made the necessary calls while I sat beside Grandma, memorizing her peaceful expression. The funeral home arrived within hours, and I watched them carry her away with professional gentleness, wrapped in the quilt she'd made as a new bride. My parents arrived that evening, letting themselves in with a key I didn't know they had. I was sitting at the kitchen table still in yesterday's clothes, staring at a cold cup of tea. Holly. My mother said, her voice mixing sympathy with something else. Anticipation, maybe. We came as soon as we could. They hadn't. I'd called them at 10 that morning. It was past 6. The funeral director needs decisions, Robert said, already scrolling through his phone. I've researched some economical options. Grandma pre-planned everything, I replied flatly. Paid for it too. I just have to confirm the details tomorrow. Linda's perfectly shaped eyebrows rose. Pre-planned? That seems unusual. She was an unusual woman. I stood, exhaustion making me sway slightly. I need to rest. You can let yourselves out. But they didn't leave. Instead, they wandered the house, whispering to each other, making notes in their phones. I heard my mother in Grandma's room opening drawers, and something inside me snapped. What are you doing? Linda startled quickly, closing the jewelry box she'd been rifling through. Just making sure nothing valuable goes missing. You know how people can be after a death. Opportunistic. The irony might have been funny if it weren't so enraging. I pointed to the door. Out. Now. Holly, you're emotional, Robert said, using his lecturing tone. We're just trying to help. I said, get out. They left with wounded dignity, Linda muttering about ungrateful daughters, and Robert promising they'd discuss this later. I changed the locks that night using the emergency locksmith and adding another expense to my maxed credit cards, worth every penny. The funeral took place on a Saturday that felt more like July than May. I'd chosen Grandma's favorite dress, the lavender one she wore to my college graduation, and the funeral director had styled her hair exactly as she'd always worn it. She looked like she might open her eyes and ask why everyone seemed so sad. Madison arrived late, sweeping in just as the service began. She wore a designer black dress that probably cost more than Grandma's monthly Social Security check, her face already arranged in dramatic grief. She'd brought Derek, her latest boyfriend, a man in his 40s who looked bored before the first hymn ended. I sat in the front row between Jennifer and Patricia, drawing comfort from the women who'd actually known Grandma in her final months. Behind us, the church filled with neighbors, former students. Grandma had taught ladies from her disbanded book club and people I'd never met who introduced themselves with stories about her kindness. Your grandmother tutored my son for free when he struggled with reading, one woman whispered. He's a teacher now because of her. She visited my mother every week in the nursing home, an elderly man shared, even after Mom forgot who she was. Madison commandeered the eulogy despite my specific request that Cousin Sarah speak. She stood at the podium, dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief that remained mysteriously dry, and began spinning fiction. Grandma Rose and I shared such a special bond. She started, her voice trembling with manufactured emotion. Every Sunday we'd talk for hours about life, love, and dreams. Jennifer's sharp intake of breath beside me nearly made me laugh. Patricia grabbed my hand, squeezing gently. I kept my eyes on Grandma's casket, covered in the yellow roses I'd chosen because they grew in her garden. Madison continued her performance, describing visits that never happened, conversations that never occurred, a relationship that existed only in her imagination. She claimed Grandma had been teaching her to knit, that they'd been planning a trip to Paris, that Grandma called her my special girl. The congregation grew restless. People who'd actually known Grandma shifted uncomfortably. Mrs. Henderson from next door actually snorted when Madison claimed she'd been helping with Grandma's garden every weekend. In closing, Madison said, tears finally appearing now that she was wrapping up, I promise to honor Grandma's memory by living with the grace and generosity she showed me. She returned to her seat, accepting Derek's consoling arm around her shoulders. I felt hundreds of eyes on me, waiting to see if I'd counter her lies. Instead, I stood and walked to the podium with the simple speech I'd written at 3 that morning. Grandma Rose taught me that love is a verb, I began. It's not what you say, but what you do. It's showing up every Sunday with groceries. It's learning someone's stories so they're never forgotten. It's holding someone's hand through their darkest hours and celebrating their brightest moments. It's choosing patience when frustration would be easier and kindness when bitterness would be justified. She lived these lessons every day, and I'm grateful I got to learn them beside her. Short, honest, and nothing like Madison's elaborate fiction. When I returned to my seat, Jennifer whispered she would have loved that. After the service, mourners gathered in the church hall for reception. I'd kept it simple: finger sandwiches, cookies from Grandma's recipe, and lemonade. Madison held court in one corner, accepting condolences like a grieving widow, while Derek checked his phone. My parents circulated with purpose, and I overheard enough to understand their agenda. "Such a big house for one person," Linda said to anyone who'd listen. "Of course, we'll need to make decisions about the estate quickly. These old properties require so much maintenance." "Madison's been having such a hard time," Robert added to another group. "Jobs are scarce these days. Family should support family." The vultures were circling before Grandma was even in the ground. "Holly." My mother appeared at my elbow as I refilled the cookie platter. "We should talk about arrangements. The will, reading the house, everything." "Mr. Brennan is handling everything. He'll contact everyone when it's time." "But surely we don't need lawyers between family. Madison's struggling, and you have your nice apartment." "Excuse me," Mrs. Henderson interrupted. "Holly, I wanted to tell you how much it meant to Rose that you were there. Every Sunday, rain or shine. She told me you were the daughter she'd wished she'd had." Linda's face flushed. "I am her daughter." Mrs. Henderson looked at her coolly. "I meant the kind who visits." My mother stalked off, and Mrs. Henderson patted my arm. "Rose saw everything, dear, everything." The burial was private, just immediate family at the cemetery, where Grandpa had been waiting 32 years for his wife. Madison wept dramatically, nearly collapsing against Derek, who looked increasingly uncomfortable with her performance. My parents stood stiffly checking their phones between prayers. As they lowered Grandma's casket, I thought about Sunday mornings yet to come. No drive to Riverside Heights. No stories over tea. No one to teach me about endurance and grace and the fierce love that builds a life worth living. But then I remembered the wooden box hidden in my room, the envelope in the safe marked with my name, the promises I'd made in her final months. Grandma might be gone, but she'd left me armed for the battle she'd known was coming. "Rest easy," I whispered as they placed roses on her casket. "I've got it from here." As we walked back to our cars, Madison grabbed my arm. "We need to talk about the house." "Not today." "When then I have rights, Holly? I'm the oldest grandchild." "Mr. Brennan will be in touch." She released me with a huff, tottering on her high heels across the cemetery grass. "This isn't over." No, I thought, watching my family drive away in their separate cars. It was just beginning. But Grandma had prepared me for this too in her way. 10 years of Sundays had taught me about more than just family recipes and garden care. They'd taught me about strength disguised as gentleness, steel wrapped in velvet, and the power of patient observation. The funeral director handed me a small envelope as I prepared to leave. "Mrs. Whitman asked me to give this to you today." Inside a note in Grandma's shaky handwriting, "My dearest Holly, they'll come at you hard and fast now. Remember, you earned my love by giving yours freely. Don't let them make you doubt what we built together. All my love, Grandma Rose. P.S. Check the kitchen drawer where I kept my journal. I left something else for today." I drove straight to the Victorian house, using my new key to enter. In the kitchen drawer beneath, where her journal had been, lay another envelope. Inside, a photo of us from last Christmas, both wearing the matching aprons she'd sewn flower in our hair and joy on our faces. On the back, she'd written, "This is what love looks like." Standing in her kitchen, surrounded by the ghost of 1,000 Sundays, I finally let myself cry. Not the careful tears of public grief, but the ugly, wrenching sobs of real loss. Because I hadn't just lost my grandmother. I'd lost my best friend, my anchor, my example of how to live with purpose and love with courage. But I'd gained something too. The strength she'd been building in me for 10 years, the knowledge that I could endure hard things, the certainty that love wasn't measured in DNA or birth order, but in showing up when showing up mattered. Tomorrow the battles would begin. Madison would scheme. My parents would manipulate. The vultures would circle closer. Tonight, though, I sat in Grandma's kitchen eating cookies from her recipe and remembered every single Sunday that had brought us here. 1 week after the funeral, Mr. Gregory Brennan's office occupied the third floor of a restored brownstone downtown. His secretary, a stern woman named Dolores, led us to a conference room that smelled of leather and old books. Through tall windows, morning light illuminated dust motes dancing like tiny ghosts. I arrived first, clutching the wooden box Grandma had entrusted to me. The contents weighed more than their physical mass, representing years of careful planning and terrible discoveries. I'd spent the week reviewing everything, preparing for this moment. Madison swept in next with Derek in tow. She wore a black suit that screamed expensive boutique, her makeup perfect despite the tragic expression she'd crafted. Derek looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, fidgeting with his phone until Madison slapped his hand. "Holly," she said, her voice dripping false sympathy. "How are you holding up? This must be so difficult handling everything alone." "I'm managing." "Well, that's about to change. Family should share these burdens." She settled into a chair like a queen taking her throne. "Derek's cousin is a real estate developer. He's very interested in Grandma's property." My parents arrived precisely at 10, my father checking his watch as if we'd kept him waiting. Linda carried a folder thick with papers, probably real estate listings for modest condos they thought I should consider. "Good, we're all here," Robert said, though Mr. Brennan hadn't appeared yet. "We should discuss how to handle this efficiently. Madison needs stability, and Holly, you have that nice apartment downtown." "Actually," Mr. Brennan's voice interrupted from the doorway, "I'll be handling the distribution according to Mrs. Whitman's explicit instructions." The elderly lawyer moved with surprising grace for his 70-something years. His assistant wheeled in a cart containing multiple folders, a laptop, and a sealed box I recognized from Grandma's safe. "Shall we begin?" He settled behind the conference table, opening the primary folder. "First, I should mention that Mrs. Whitman updated her will 3 weeks before her passing, during a period of complete mental clarity. I can provide medical documentation if anyone wishes to challenge her capacity." Madison shifted forward. "Updated from what?" "That's irrelevant to today's proceedings. Now let me read the distributions." He adjusted his reading glasses and began with the legal formalities. Then, "To my granddaughter, Madison Elizabeth Carter, I leave the sum of $5,000 and my collection of costume jewelry, which she always admired. I hope she will treasure these pieces for their sentimental, rather than monetary value." The silence that followed could have choked us all. Madison's mouth opened and closed like a landed fish. That's all," she finally managed. "Please allow me to continue." Mr. Brennan's tone remained professionally neutral. "To my son, Robert James Whitman, and his wife, Linda Marie Whitman, I leave nothing, as I have already given them more than enough throughout their lives, including the down payment for their home bail money on 3 occasions and numerous loans that were never repaid." My mother gasped. Robert's face flushed purple. "To my granddaughter, Holly Ann Whitman." Mr. Brennan continued, his voice warming slightly. "I leave the remainder of my estate, including the house at 427 Riverside Heights Drive, and all its contents, my investment accounts currently valued at approximately $1.2 million, my savings accounts, and all personal effects not otherwise designated." The explosion was immediate. "This is insane!" Madison shot to her feet, her chair scraping against hardwood. "I'm the oldest. That house should be mine." You can't be serious, Robert growled, also standing. I'm her son, her only child. This is illegal. Linda had tears ready. How could she do this to us? We're family. Mr. Brennan waited for the storm to subside slightly. Mrs. Whitman anticipated these reactions. She left a letter to be read if anyone contested her decisions. He withdrew an envelope and began reading. My dear family, if you're hearing this, it means you're unhappy with my choices. Let me be clear, these decisions weren't made lightly or in haste. They reflect years of observation and consideration. Robert, you haven't visited me without wanting something since your father died. Linda, you've measured my worth in property values and potential inheritance for decades. Madison, you broke my heart every time you stole from me. Yes, I knew about the money and every time you promised to visit, but didn't. Holly alone showed me love without expectation. She gave me her Sundays, her care, her genuine affection. She earned what I'm leaving her through consistent kindness, not entitlement. If you truly believe family helps family, then help Holly now by respecting my wishes. The letter continued with specific examples: missed birthdays, ignored holidays, requests for money, followed by months of silence. Each word precisely chosen to prevent any claim of mental incompetence or undue influence. Furthermore, Mr. Brennan added, Mrs. Whitman established a trust structure that makes the estate transfers ironclad. Any legal challenge would be extremely costly, and I assure you, ultimately futile. Robert's practiced speech began before Mr. Brennan finished closing the folder. Holly, you have to understand, your sister needs this more than you do. She's been struggling unemployed for 2 years now. You have a good job stability. Family helps family. He delivered the words like an actor hitting his marks, probably rehearsed in the car with Linda. The phrase, family helps family, appeared 3 times in his 2-minute guilt trip. Madison could move into the house, get back on her feet. Linda added, tears streaming now. You could even stay in the guest room until you find another apartment. Wouldn't that be nice? Sisters together, supporting each other? Or, Derek spoke for the first time. We could work out a deal. Market value minus a family discount. Cash offer. Madison turned on him. Derek, we discussed this. What you said the house was worth at least $800,000, even at 70%. Shut up, Madison hissed, then refocused on me. Holly, please. You know Grandma wasn't thinking clearly, the dementia. Mrs. Whitman's mental capacity was thoroughly documented. Mr. Brennan interjected. I have affidavits from Dr. Patricia Henley, the home health aides, and my own observations. Additionally, he opened the sealed box from Grandma's safe. She provided video recordings of our meetings where she clearly articulated her wishes. He pulled out a tablet and suddenly Grandma's voice filled the room. Clear, determined, nothing like the confused woman from her final weeks. I, Rose Marie Whitman, being of sound mind and body, do hereby confirm my wishes for my estate. I am not being coerced, manipulated, or unduly influenced. My granddaughter Holly has cared for me with genuine love. My other family members have shown their true colors through years of neglect, and in Madison's case, theft. Yes, Madison, I have cameras. I know about the money, the jewelry, the silver you pawned. Holly doesn't know I'm recording this because she'd probably try to talk me into being more generous, but I'm tired of enabling people who only see me as a bank account or a future inheritance. Madison had gone pale. She recorded. There's more, Mr. Brennan said quietly. Mrs. Whitman was quite thorough. The video continued with Grandma detailing specific incidents. Madison taking cash from her purse, Robert trying to convince her to sign power of attorney papers, Linda touring the house with a real estate agent while Grandma was supposedly napping. I leave Holly everything because she gave me everything that mattered: her time, her love, her respect. This isn't about blood or birth order. It's about who showed up when showing up wasn't convenient or profitable. When the video ended, the room sat in stunned silence. Madison's carefully crafted image had shattered. My parents' moral high ground had crumbled. Even Derek looked uncomfortable, probably calculating that his girlfriend wasn't the wronged heiress she'd claimed to be. "There's one more thing," Mr. Brennan said. He handed me an envelope marked, "For Holly, when they pressure you." Grandma's final letter. I'd been carrying it since the will reading began, waiting for this moment. With trembling fingers, I broke the seal and read aloud. "My dearest Holly, by now you've heard their arguments and felt their pressure. They'll make you doubt yourself, question if you deserve this gift. So let me be clear one last time. You earned every brick of that house, every penny in those accounts, through love freely given. You didn't visit expecting inheritance. You visited because you saw me as a person worth knowing, not a problem to manage or a resource to tap. That house has sheltered 4 generations of our family. Fill it with the same love you showed me. Create the warm, welcoming home Robert never valued and Madison never respected. And when they come at you, because they will remember that no is a complete sentence. All my love, Grandma Rose." I folded the letter carefully, meeting each of their eyes in turn. "I won't be signing anything over." Grandma's wishes were clear. "You little—" Madison lunged across the table, but Derek caught her arm. "You manipulated her. You turned her against us." "I loved her," I said simply. "That's all I did." "We'll contest this," Robert declared, standing with what he probably thought was intimidating authority. "No judge will uphold this blatant favoritism." Mr. Brennan smiled slightly. "You're welcome to try. Of course, contesting means all evidence becomes public record. The recordings, the theft documentation, the attempted elder abuse." "Elder abuse," Linda squeaked. "Attempting to obtain power of attorney through coercion, taking money without permission, trying to sell her house while she lived. Yes, these could be construed as elder abuse. I've prepared a comprehensive file should it become necessary." The reality of their position finally penetrated. Madison slumped in her chair. Robert's righteous anger deflated. Linda stopped crying, calculating damage control. "The jewelry," Madison said quietly. "Can I at least have that?" "It's in the house," I replied. "We can arrange a time for you to collect it." "And the 5,000 will be transferred to your account within 10 business days," Mr. Brennan confirmed. They left one by one. First Derek mumbling about a meeting, then my parents Linda whispering furiously to Robert about consulting their own lawyer. Madison went last, pausing at the door. "I hope you're happy," she said, not turning around. "You've destroyed this family." "No, Madison, I just stopped enabling it." After they left, Mr. Brennan handed me a thick folder. "Everything you need is here. Deed transfers, account information, tax documents. Your grandmother also left detailed instructions about maintaining the investment portfolio. She was quite savvy." "How long did she plan this?" "Years," he admitted. "She came to me after your grandfather passed, worried about what would happen. She'd seen how your parents handled his death, the fights over his tools, his car, even his clothes. She didn't want that for you." He packed up his files, then paused. "I knew your grandmother for 40 years, handled all her legal matters. In all that time, I never saw her speak about anyone the way she spoke about you. You brought light to her final years, Miss Whitman. Don't let anyone make you feel guilty for being loved." I sat alone in the conference room after he left, holding the folder that represented Grandma's final gift. Not just the house or the money, but the foresight to protect me from the very people who should have been protecting her. The battle was far from over. I knew my family well enough to predict the coming storms. But Grandma had given me more than property. She'd given me proof of my worth, evidence of her love, and the strength to stand against those who confused DNA with devotion. I thought about her video, how strong she'd looked. Despite knowing what was coming, she'd faced her own decline with grace while planning for my future with strategy. Even in her confusion, she'd been protecting me. "Thank you," I whispered to the empty room, to her memory. to the love that transcended death and greed and the petty jealousies of small hearts. Tomorrow, I'd change the locks again, set up security cameras, prepare for whatever desperate measures my family might attempt. Today, though, I held Grandma's trust close and felt for the first time since her death truly grateful she was free from them all. The ceasefire lasted exactly 36 hours. Monday morning began with 17 missed calls, all from family numbers I should have blocked already. Tuesday brought the first ambush at my apartment building. I was carrying groceries when Madison materialized from behind a concrete pillar in the parking garage. "Holly, we need to talk like civilized people," she said, though nothing about her aggressive stance suggested civility. "There's nothing to discuss. Grandma's wishes were clear." "Grandma was sick, confused. You took advantage of that confusion." I shifted my grocery bags, exhaustion already seeping in. "Madison, you attended the will reading. You saw the videos. She was completely lucid when she made those decisions." "Videos can be edited. Dates can be manipulated." She stepped closer and I smelled wine on her breath despite the early hour. "I've been talking to a lawyer. Elder abuse through isolation is a real thing. You moved in, cut her off from family. I took care of her while you stole from her purse." Her face flushed ugly and mottled. "That's a lie." "It's on camera, Madison. Multiple times, different dates. Do you want me to post them online? Let everyone see what kind of granddaughter you really were?" She deflated slightly, then rallied. "I'm facing eviction, Holly. Actually facing it. Next week. Where am I supposed to go? Maybe to one of the jobs you've been supposedly interviewing for these past 2 years. You think it's easy? You with your perfect life and stable job?" I almost laughed. Perfect life. I depleted my savings caring for Grandma, maxed out credit cards, taken unpaid leave that might have destroyed my career. But Madison wouldn't hear that. In her narrative, she was always the victim, everyone else the villain. "I need to go," I said, maneuvering around her. "This isn't over," she called after me. "Family helps family, Holly. Remember that." Wednesday, they escalated to my workplace. I'd barely settled at my desk, trying to catch up on 3 months of accumulated projects when reception called. "Holly, your mother is here. She says it's an emergency." I found Linda in the lobby, dressed in her best sympathetic mother costume, pastel cardigan, minimal jewelry tissues, clutched in one manicured hand. Several of my colleagues had already noticed the commotion. "Yeah, Holly, darling," she said loud enough for the entire floor to hear. "I'm so worried about you, taking on that big house all alone after such a traumatic loss. Your father and I think you need help processing this grief." "Mother, this is my workplace. Whatever you need to discuss can wait until—" "Shh, can it though?" She moved closer, lowering her voice to a stage whisper, still audible to everyone. "You're not thinking clearly, sweetheart. First pushing away your family, now isolating yourself with work. Classic signs of complicated grief." Dr. Morrison agrees. Dr. Morrison, their golf buddy who'd written suspicious prescriptions for my mother's anxiety for years. I felt my colleagues' eyes sense their whispered speculations. Marketing Holly, whose grandmother just died now, dealing with family drama in the office. "We need to leave. Now!" I gripped her elbow, steering her toward the elevators. "I'm just trying to help," she protested, but allowed herself to be guided. "Your sister is homeless, Holly. Actually homeless, living in her car. Is that what you want?" In the elevator away from witnesses, her mask slipped. "Do you have any idea how this looks? People are talking. The Hendersons, the Pettys, everyone from the neighborhood knows you inherited everything. They're calling us terrible parents, asking what we did to deserve being disinherited." "What did you do, Mother?" Her face hardened. "Don't be smart with me. Your grandmother was old and confused. She didn't know what she was doing. One daughter gets everything while the other gets costume jewelry. It's practically senile behavior." The elevator opened at the ground floor and I walked her to the exit. "Grandma knew exactly what she was doing. And if you come to my workplace again, I'll file a restraining order." "You wouldn't dare." Try me. Thursday brought a new tactic, the extended family intervention. I arrived at the Victorian house after work to find cars lining the street. On the porch sat Aunt Sarah, Uncle Michael, cousins I hadn't seen since Christmas 3 years ago, and various other relatives who'd crawled out of the woodwork. Robert stood at the center like a general marshalling troops. Holly, good. We're having a family meeting about the situation. On my porch, at my house, without my permission. A.C. He turned to the assembled relatives. This attitude is exactly what I was telling you about. Holly's changed since Rose died, become selfish hard. Well, Holly's always been lovely, Aunt Sarah said quietly. She was Grandma's younger sister, though they'd been estranged for years over some forgotten slight. Rose told me how faithfully she visited. Visits designed to manipulate? Madison appeared from behind a pillar, clearly drunk now. 10 years of calculated Sunday visits to steal our inheritance. Madison, you're drunk, I said flatly. Everyone needs to leave. Now. We're not going anywhere, Uncle Michael declared. He'd always been a blowhard, showing up at holidays to drink Grandpa's good scotch and pontificate about politics. Family business gets settled by family. I pulled out my phone. I'm calling the police. You have 2 minutes to get off my property. You'd call the cops on your own family, Cousin Janet gasped, clutching her pearls like a community theater actress. Watch me. I dialed, making eye contact with each of them. The 911 operator answered, and I calmly explained the situation. Yes, multiple people refusing to leave my property. 427 Riverside Heights Drive, thank you. The exodus was swift. Relatives scattered to their cars, muttering about disgrace and selfishness. Madison had to be practically carried by Derek, who'd appeared from somewhere to collect her. Only Aunt Sarah lingered. I'm sorry, she said quietly. I didn't know it would be like this. They called, said it was important. She pressed a small envelope into my hand. Rose wrote me near the end. She wanted me to give you this if things got ugly. After they left, I sat on Grandma's porch swing and opened Sarah's envelope. Inside, a photograph of Grandma and Sarah as young women arms, linked laughing at some long-forgotten joke. On the back, in Grandma's handwriting, sisters by choice, not chance. Don't let them steal your peace, Holly. Sarah knows the truth about family. Love, Rose. Friday, the campaign turned digital. I woke to dozens of Facebook notifications. Madison had posted a manifesto about elder abuse and stolen inheritance, tagging every mutual acquaintance. The post included photos of her supposedly living in her car, though the background looked suspiciously like Derek's apartment complex. The comments ranged from sympathy to skepticism. So sorry this happened to you, Madison family should share. Didn't you post about buying that new purse last week? I remember Mrs. Whitman saying Holly was the only one who visited. My phone rang constantly. I turned it off, focused on work, tried to pretend my life wasn't imploding in real time, but the damage was spreading. My boss called me in that afternoon. Oh, Holly, I don't usually involve myself in personal matters, Patricia began settling behind her desk. But when those matters spill into the workplace? My mother's visit. I'm so sorry. It won't happen again. Patricia surprised me by laughing. Your mother was entertaining, but I'm not talking about that. She turned her computer screen toward me. I knew your grandmother. We served on the Literacy Foundation board together. The screen showed a photo of Grandma and Patricia at some charity function, both smiling over glasses of wine. She talked about you constantly, Patricia continued. Every meeting, Holly this, Holly that. How proud she was of your work here, your dedication. She also mentioned your sister occasionally, usually when asking for advice about boundaries with toxic family members. Relief flooded through me. I didn't know you knew her. Rose was a force of nature, smart, kind, and absolutely no fool. She told me months ago that she was leaving everything to you, asked if I thought it was the right decision. I told her family isn't about blood, it's about who shows up. She liked that. Patricia leaned back. So whatever circus your relatives are creating, know that those of us who actually knew Rose understand completely. Take whatever time you need to sort this out. I left her office feeling stronger, validated, but the reprieve was short-lived. That evening, I found Derek on my doorstep again, this time alone. Madison doesn't know I'm here, he began, looking uncomfortable. Look, I'm not proud of this, but she owes me $12,000. Loans, credit cards I let her use, rent I covered. She kept saying when her grandmother died, "That's between you and Madison." She said the house was promised to her, said she'd been visiting every week for years, that you barely knew the old lady. He shifted awkwardly. I'm starting to think she lied about a lot of things. You're just now figuring that out. He pulled out his phone, showing me text messages from Madison spanning months. Plans to secure the inheritance. Complaints about having to pretend to care about the old batting schemes to convince Grandma to add her to the deed. I thought about giving these to you earlier, he admitted, at the will reading, but I figured I'd get my money either way. Now, he shrugged. She's talking about suing you, hiring some sketchy lawyer who wants a huge retainer. Money she doesn't have, but swears she'll get from you. I saved the screenshots he offered, adding them to my growing file of evidence. Derek left with a mumbled apology, and I wondered how many other people Madison had deceived with her tales of the devoted granddaughter cheated of her birthright. Saturday brought the finale of the week's harassment campaign. A formal family meeting at my childhood home, complete with an actual printed agenda Robert had prepared. I almost didn't go, but something in my mother's voicemail suggested consequences if I didn't appear. The house I'd grown up in felt foreign now, like a stage set for someone else's life. Madison sat in the living room's best chair, tissue box prominently displayed. My parents flanked her like bodyguards. Even Derek was there, looking miserable in the corner. Thank you for coming," Robert began, formally consulting his notes. "We've gathered to discuss the equitable distribution of Rose Whitman's estate, given the unusual and clearly compromised nature of her will." "The will stands," I said simply. "This discussion is pointless." "Hear us out," Linda interjected. "We've consulted with advisors." "Your golf buddy is not a real lawyer, Mother." "Ah, and we've developed a fair solution." She produced her own folder thick with documents. "You keep the house, but sign over the investment accounts to Madison. That's more than generous, considering you manipulated a sick woman." I almost laughed at their audacity. No. Robert's face reddened. "Just no discussion, no consideration for your sister's situation." "Correct. No." Madison burst into theatrical tears. "I'm living in my car, eating dollar menu meals, while you sit in that mansion counting Grandma's money." Interesting," I said, pulling out my phone, "because these photos from your Instagram show you at a spa day yesterday, tagged at Serenity Springs. That's what, $200 for a basic package." The tears stopped abruptly. "And this receipt Derek shared shows you spending $800 at Nordstrom last week. Fascinating budget for someone allegedly homeless." "Derek," Madison shrieked, turning on her boyfriend. "You showed her—" "I want my money back," he said quietly. "You've been lying to everyone, Mad, including me." The meeting devolved into chaos. Madison screaming at Derek, Linda crying about family loyalty, Robert demanding I see reason. I stood to leave, but Robert blocked the door. "You're not leaving until we resolve this." "Move or I call the police. Again." He studied my face, perhaps finally understanding that his youngest daughter had developed a spine. He stepped aside, but not before delivering his parting shot. "You've destroyed this family, Holly. Chosen money over blood. Your grandmother would be ashamed." I turned back, meeting each of their eyes. "Grandma would be proud. She taught me that love means showing up and that no is a complete sentence. I'm using both lessons now." Outside, I sat in my car for a long moment, hands shaking with adrenaline and suppressed rage. My phone buzzed with another call from Madison, probably ready to unleash fresh manipulation. I blocked the number, then did the same for my parents. The week had been exhausting but clarifying. They'd shown their true colors in high definition, proving Grandma's assessments correct. The family that claimed to value loyalty knew nothing about it. The sister who preached about sharing had only ever taken. The parents who demanded respect had never earned it. I drove to the Victorian house, my house now, and parked in the driveway. The porch light glowed warmly, welcoming me home. Inside, I found the photo Aunt Sarah had given me and placed it on the mantel next to pictures of Grandma and me. "You warned me," I said to her smiling face. "Prepared me, even gave me the evidence to fight back." I touched the frame gently. "Don't worry, I've got this." My phone, now blessedly silent, showed dozens of blocked calls and messages. Let them rage against the walls I'd built. Let them exhaust themselves with their entitled fury. I had work to do, a house to make truly mine, and a life to build on the foundation of Sunday visits and genuine love. The vultures could circle all they wanted. This prey had grown talons of her own. The house felt different at night. Without Grandma's gentle presence, shadows stretched longer floorboards, creaked louder, and the silence pressed against my ears like cotton. I'd been sleeping in my old apartment, still coming to the Victorian only during daylight to sort through belongings and avoid the ghosts of memory that haunted each room. But tonight, something pulled me back. Maybe it was the week of family harassment, or maybe I just needed to feel closer to Grandma. I found myself in the kitchen at midnight making tea in her favorite pot, sitting at the table where we'd shared 10 years of conversations. The wooden box waited in my bedroom upstairs, but I'd carried Grandma's sealed letter with me all week, afraid to open it, afraid of what final secrets it might reveal. Now, with chamomile steam curling into the darkness and the house settling around me, like a familiar embrace, I carefully broke the seal. Her handwriting, shaky but determined, filled 3 pages of her good stationery. The lavender paper still smelled faintly of her perfume. "My dearest Holly," it began, "if you're reading this, then the wolves have begun to circle, and you need to know the whole truth. Not just about the money or the house, but about why I've watched your family with such sadness and you with such hope." I settled back, hearing her voice in every carefully chosen word. "Or first let me tell you about the theft. Yes, Madison stole from me, but it started long before the cameras caught her. It began when she was 17, taking 20s from my wallet during family dinners. I noticed, but said nothing, hoping she'd outgrow it. Instead, she graduated to bigger thefts, jewelry that went missing, checks from my checkbook, the silver tea service that belonged to my mother, pawned for drug money during her college years. My hands trembled. I'd suspected Madison had problems, but not this extensive history. I confronted her once when she was 23. She cried, blamed stress from school, promised to get help. I paid for therapy. She never attended rehab. She left after 3 days. Your parents knew, but asked me to keep it quiet for the family reputation. So I did, and my silence enabled her dissent. The letter continued with a detailed accounting $30,000 over 15 years, not counting the pawned items never recovered. Each theft carefully documented in Grandma's records, evidence she'd compiled not for revenge, but for protection. But Madison's sins pale compared to your parents' betrayal. 3 years ago, while you were building your career and I was still sharp, Robert and Linda came with paperwork. They wanted power of attorney, claiming it would simplify things when I got older. The papers they brought would have given them immediate control of everything. I set down my teacup, nausea rising. 3 years ago, before any signs of dementia, when Grandma was completely independent. I pretended to consider it, then had Mr. Brennan review the documents. He was horrified. Hidden in the legal language were provisions to sell the house immediately, liquidate all assets, and place me in the cheapest care facility they could find. They'd already toured places, Holly, had everything arranged. They just needed my signature. Tears blurred my vision, but I kept reading. I confronted Robert, my own son. Do you know what he said? It's for the best, Mother. That house is too big. Your money could help Madison get established. Not a word about my wishes, my comfort, my life. I was already dead to them, just inconveniently still breathing. The next section revealed why Grandma had installed cameras throughout the house. After that betrayal, I needed to protect myself. The cameras showed more than Madison's theft. They captured conversations between your parents and Madison, planning how to divide my estate. Linda measuring rooms for renovation. Robert calling the house their retirement fund. All while I was upstairs supposedly napping, but actually listening to my family plan my erasure. I had to stop reading, overwhelmed by the cruelty. These people who claimed to love family had seen Grandma only as an obstacle to their enrichment. But she'd fought back with the weapons available to an elderly woman, careful documentation and strategic planning. The letter's tone shifted, then becoming warmer. But you, my darling Holly, you never knew about any of this, because you never looked at me with calculating eyes. Every Sunday, you brought sunshine into my life. You asked about my stories, not my bank balance. You helped in my garden because you enjoyed our time together, not because you were establishing a claim. She recounted specific moments I'd forgotten. The Sunday I'd brought her art supplies because she mentioned missing painting. The afternoon we'd spent trying to call my cousin's new baby in Oregon, laughing at our technological incompetence. The morning I'd found her crying over a photo of Grandpa and simply held her until the grief passed. You gave me dignity in my final years, Holly. When the dementia began its cruel work, you didn't see a problem to be managed, but a person still worthy of respect. You sacrificed without being asked, loved without keeping score. That's why everything is yours, not as payment, but as a tool to build the life you deserve. The next page contained harder truths. There's something else you must know, though I pray you'll never need this information. Robert is not your biological father. The words hit like a physical blow. I read them again, certain I'd misunderstood. Linda had an affair early in their marriage with a man named James Chen. You were the result. Robert never knew, or at least never acknowledged knowing. Linda confessed to me when you were 5, terrified Robert would find out. I kept her secret to protect you from their inevitable implosion. Pieces of my childhood suddenly made sense. Robert's coldness toward me compared to his indulgence of Madison. The way Linda always seemed guilty around me, overcompensating with material gifts while withholding emotional warmth. The family jokes about how I looked nothing like Robert. I tell you this not to hurt you, but to free you. Their rejection of you began before you were born, rooted in Linda's guilt and Robert's subconscious knowledge that something was amiss. You owe them nothing, Holly. No guilt, no second chances, no pieces of your inheritance to buy their love. They made their choices long ago. The letter's final section contained practical instructions. In the safe, you'll find contact information for James Chen. He doesn't know about you, but he's a good man who went on to become a pediatric surgeon. If you ever want to reach out, that's your choice. Also in the safe are recordings of your family's worst moments, their plans and schemes, and cruel dismissals of my humanity. Use them if needed to protect yourself. Her concluding words blurred through my tears. My dearest Holly, you've been my greatest joy and unexpected blessing. In you, I saw the daughter I'd wished for, the granddaughter I dreamed of. You taught me that family isn't about blood, but about choosing to love when loving is hard. The house is yours because you already filled it with warmth. The money is yours because you never asked for it. My love is yours because you earned it with every Sunday visit, every shared meal, every moment you saw me as Rose instead of just Grandma. Live fully, love freely, and never apologize for being chosen. All my love forever and always, Grandma Rose. A postscript followed, check the kitchen drawer where I kept my journal. I left one more thing. I was already in the kitchen, so I pulled open the familiar drawer. Beyond where the journal had been wrapped in tissue paper lay a small velvet box. Inside Grandma's engagement ring sparkled the one piece Madison had always coveted. A note was tucked beneath it, for when you find someone who shows up every Sunday. I slipped the ring onto my right hand, feeling its weight like an anchor. Then I climbed the stairs to Grandma's room, standing in the doorway of the space that still smelled like her lavender perfume. "They didn't deserve you," I whispered to the empty room, "but I'll try to." I pulled out my phone and scrolled to the block numbers. For a moment, I considered unblocking them, sharing Grandma's revelations, watching their facades crumble. But what would that accomplish? They'd deny, deflect, probably use the information about my parentage as ammunition against me. Instead, I walked to the safe Grandma had shown me months ago. Inside, alongside the promised contact information and USB drives of evidence, I found more photos. Not of family gatherings or posed holiday shots, but candid pictures of our Sundays. Me flour-dusted in her kitchen, both of us mud-splattered in the garden, curled on the couch during old movie marathons. In every photo, we radiated genuine joy. No performance, no calculation, just two people who'd found their chosen family in each other. I gathered everything important and relocated to the living room, building a fire in the hearth despite the mild night. One by one, I fed the flames with my own contributions, angry text messages I'd printed, email threads full of manipulation, the agenda from today's horrible family meeting. But I kept Grandma's letter, her photos, her ring, and her evidence. Not for revenge, but for protection. The truth she'd shared was a shield against future guilt, future gaslighting, future attempts to rewrite history. As the fire died to embers, I made my decision. Tomorrow, I'd move into the Victorian properly, not as a guest in Grandma's house, but as the rightful owner of my home. I'd tend her garden, host Sunday dinners for chosen family, and fill the rooms with the kind of love she'd taught me to give. The grandfather clock chimed 3 in the morning. In 6 hours, Madison would probably start her daily barrage of calls. My parents would scheme new manipulations. The vultures would continue circling. But I had armor now, the truth. I had weapons, the evidence. Most importantly, I had Grandma's final gift, the absolute certainty that I was chosen, loved, and worthy of everything she'd left me. I climbed the stairs to my new bedroom, Grandma's ring catching lamplight with each step. Tomorrow would bring fresh battles, but tonight, surrounded by the home that love built, I finally understood why she'd fought so hard to preserve this place for me. It wasn't just a house. It was proof that showing up mattered, that consistent love could overcome calculated greed, that family meant choosing each other every Sunday for 10 years until death finally parted us. "Good night, Grandma," I whispered into the darkness. "Thank you for choosing me. Thank you for the truth. Thank you for everything." The house settled around me, creaking its familiar lullaby, and for the first time since her death, I slept peacefully in the bed she'd prepared for me long before I knew I'd need it. Sunday morning arrived with unexpected sunshine streaming through the Victorian's lace curtains and illuminating dust motes that danced like tiny celebrations. It was my first Sunday without Grandma to visit, and the absence felt like a missing limb. I made coffee in her kitchen, using her percolator instead of my modern machine, finding comfort in the familiar rhythm. The safe waited in Grandma's study, a squat metal guardian of secrets. I'd put off examining everything, partly from fear, partly from a desire to postpone more pain. But the family's escalating harassment demanded ammunition, and Grandma had provided an arsenal. I spread everything across the massive oak dining table, USB drives labeled by date manila folders thick with bank statements, a leather journal in Grandma's precise handwriting, and 3 external hard drives from the security system. The contact information for James Chen, my biological father, I set aside. That revelation required emotional bandwidth I didn't currently possess. The first USB drive contained video files dating back 3 years. I clicked on the earliest dated, just weeks after my parents' failed power of attorney attempt. The kitchen camera showed Madison entering through the back door using a key I didn't know she had. She moved with practiced efficiency, heading straight for Grandma's purse on the counter. The timestamp read 2:30 in the afternoon, a Tuesday. Grandma would have been napping upstairs. Madison extracted bills from the wallet, counted them, then seemed to reconsider and took more. The total looked like at least $200. She replaced the wallet, carefully checked that everything appeared undisturbed, and left. The next video, a month later, showed her in Grandma's bedroom. This time, she went for the jewelry box, selecting pieces with a discerning eye. Not the valuable antiques I noticed, but the gold chains and modest diamond earrings that could be pawned without questions. Smart enough to avoid items that might be recognized, greedy enough to steal from her grandmother regardless. $30,000 over 15 years, Grandma had written. Now I was seeing how. 200 here, a necklace there, multiplied by years of entitlement. I forced myself through dozens of videos documenting the pattern. Madison usually struck during Grandma's nap time or church mornings. She'd clearly studied the routine, knowing exactly when to arrive and how long she had. The casualness of it sickened me, the way she'd whistle while robbing an elderly woman who loved her. But the theft videos paled compared to the conversations captured. One file from 18 months ago showed my parents and Madison in the living room, Grandma presumably upstairs. "The market's perfect for selling," Robert was saying, gesturing around the room. "Victorian restoration is trendy. We could get 900,000, maybe more." "Oh, split 3 ways, that's 300,000 each." Linda added her calculator app open on her phone. "Enough for Madison to get established, and we could finally take that European cruise." "I don't want money," Madison protested. "I want the house. It should stay in the family." "Don't be sentimental," Robert scoffed. "You can't afford the taxes, let alone the maintenance. Better to sell while mother's still—" He paused, searching for words. "Manageable." "While she's still alive, you mean?" Madison said flatly. Linda's laugh was brittle. "Well, yes, these things are easier when the owner cooperates. Once she's gone, if Holly makes a fuss—" "Holly won't be a problem," Robert said with confidence that made my stomach turn. "She's always been easily guilted. A few tears from her mother, some talk about family duty, she'll sign whatever we need." They continued planning my manipulation and Grandma's displacement like arranging furniture. Madison wanted her bedroom for an art studio. Linda envisioned the parlor as a vacation rental. Robert calculated property tax increases and maintenance costs, everything reduced to numbers on a spreadsheet. The date stamp showed this was 6 months before Grandma's diagnosis. They weren't planning for her decline, they were planning around her life. The journal provided context for the videos. Grandma's entries began 3 years ago, right after the power of attorney attempt. March 15th. Robert came today with papers. I pretended to be confused, but I understood perfectly. They want to put me away and take everything William and I built. My own son. I've failed somewhere as a mother, but I won't fail Holly. April 2nd. Installed cameras today. The technician was discreet. I feel like a spy in my own home, but I need proof. Madison took $140 from my purse last week. I'm keeping track now. May 20th. Holly came for our regular Sunday. She noticed I seemed sad and spent an extra hour just holding my hand while we watched the birds. She doesn't know her family is planning to destroy her inheritance, and I can't bear to tell her. She has such faith in people's goodness. The entries continued documenting every theft, every overheard conversation, every small betrayal, but interspersed were moments of joy, all centered on our Sundays. June 3rd. Holly taught me to use video calls today. We laughed so hard when I accidentally turned on a cat filter. This is what family should be, sharing joy without calculating its worth. August 18th. Bad day, confused William's death date. Holly found me crying in the garage where he kept his tools. She didn't try to fix it or minimize it, just sat with me on the concrete floor until I remembered where I was. Robert would have called a facility. December 1st, Holly brought art supplies because I mentioned missing painting. Haven't touched a brush in years, but she remembered. Madison only remembers when rent is due. The second hard drive contained financial records. Grandma had been meticulous photographing every check Madison asked for, every loan never repaid, every sob story that ended with Grandma opening her wallet. The total was staggering beyond the theft. Madison had directly taken another $42,000 over the years. But more interesting were the investment statements. Grandma had been shrewder than anyone suspected. After Grandpa died, she'd taken his life insurance and invested wisely. The house was paid off, but she'd maintained a mortgage payment schedule, putting that money into diverse portfolios instead. While everyone thought she was living on Social Security and William's modest pension, she'd been quietly building wealth. For Holly, many entries noted, building her freedom fund. The USB drives also contained audio recordings from the nanny cam in the living room, hours of family conversations when they thought they were alone. The cruelest was from last Christmas Eve after I'd left to drive home. Madison's voice. God, how much longer do we have to pretend she's losing it? Today she called me Linda twice. Linda. The doctor said it could be years. These things progress differently for everyone. Robert. We could speed things along. There are places that specialize in compassionate care. Very peaceful, very final. Madison. Dad, we can't. That's... Robert. I'm kidding, mostly. But seriously, we need to start documenting her confusion. Build a case for incompetence. Holly's too soft-hearted to fight us if we present it as what's best for Grandma. They'd been planning to have her declared incompetent months before the official diagnosis, not to help her, but to access her assets faster. The final USB contained something unexpected: videos Grandma had recorded herself speaking directly to the camera. The first was dated right after her diagnosis. Hello, Holly. If you're watching this, then I'm gone and you're probably drowning in evidence of your family's sins. I'm sorry, my dear. I wish I could have protected you from this truth, but protection and preparation aren't the same thing. She looked tired but determined, wearing the blue cardigan I'd given her for her birthday. I need you to understand that none of this is your fault. Robert's coldness, Linda's distance, Madison's greed, these existed before you were born. You didn't cause their cruelty, and you can't cure it with kindness. I learned that too late. She spoke for 20 minutes, outlining her plans, her reasoning, her hopes for my future. Near the end, she said something that broke my heart. I used to wonder if I was wrong to leave you everything. If I was being unfair to Madison, letting my hurt override grandmother's love. Then I realized something: Madison never loved me. She loved the idea of inheriting from me. There's a difference between visiting from duty and visiting from devotion. You taught me that difference, Holly. Every Sunday for 10 years you chose me. Not my money, not my house. Me. The very last file was dated just a week before she died, during one of her final clear moments. Holly, my darling girl, be strong now. They'll come at you with guilt and manipulation and false tears. They'll rewrite history, claim closeness that never existed, paint you as the villain. Don't let them. You earned every brick of this house with love. You paid for every dollar with devotion. This isn't an inheritance. It's a gift freely given to the only person who gave freely to me. I love you. Grandma Rose. I sat surrounded by evidence until the morning became afternoon. The USB drives and documents went back in the safe, but I kept out a few key videos and the journal. Tomorrow, I'd make copies, store them separately. Grandma had taught me the value of documentation. My phone, silent all morning, thanks to blocked numbers, suddenly rang with an unknown caller. Against my better judgment, I answered. Miss Whitman? This is Patricia Hendrickson from Adult Protective Services. I'm calling regarding a complaint filed about elder abuse and financial exploitation. We need to schedule an interview. Madison had followed through on her threat, but thanks to Grandma's foresight, I was ready. Of course, I said calmly. I have extensive documentation about my grandmother's care and the actual financial exploitation she suffered. When would you like to meet? The investigator seemed surprised by my cooperation. We scheduled for Tuesday afternoon. I spent the rest of Sunday organizing evidence into a clear narrative. The videos of Madison stealing, the recordings of family planning to displace Grandma, the journal entries documenting years of theft and neglect, medical records showing my consistent presence at appointments, Jennifer and Patricia's contact information as witnesses. By evening, I had a comprehensive file that painted a very different picture than whatever fiction Madison had spun. But more than that, I had clarity. Grandma hadn't just left me money and property, she'd left me the truth weaponized and organized, ready to defend against the family that had plotted against us both. As night fell, I stood in the garden we'd tended together, looking up at stars just beginning to appear. Somewhere up there, I imagined Grandma, watching, probably tutting about the state of the tomato plants I'd neglected this week. Thank you, I whispered to the sky, for trusting me with the truth, for preparing me for this fight, for choosing me as much as I chose you. A warm breeze rustled the leaves, carrying the scent of roses from the bush Grandpa had planted decades ago. It felt like an answer, a benediction, a promise that I wasn't facing this alone. Tomorrow would bring new battles, but tonight, armed with truth and evidence of a grandmother's love, I was ready for war. Tuesday afternoon arrived with the kind of crisp clarity that makes everything appear in sharp focus. I'd chosen the downtown Marriott's restaurant for the family meeting, a public space with plenty of witnesses and security cameras. The Adult Protective Services interview that morning had gone better than expected, with investigator Patricia Hendrickson barely concealing her disgust as she had reviewed the evidence of Madison's theft. In 30 years of doing this job, she'd said, closing her file, I've rarely seen such comprehensive documentation of actual elder abuse. Your sister should be grateful you haven't pressed criminal charges. Now I sat at a corner table, my briefcase beside me containing copies of the most damning evidence. The originals remained locked in a safety deposit box I'd opened Monday morning. I'd arrived 30 minutes early, wanting the psychological advantage of established territory. Madison entered first, wearing what she probably thought looked professional but screamed, "Borrowed from a friend." Derek followed his expression, suggesting he'd rather be anywhere else. My parents arrived separately, Linda clutching Robert's arm as if approaching a funeral. They settled across from me, Madison immediately grabbing the water pitcher with shaking hands. Up close, I could see the toll her lifestyle had taken. Bloodshot eyes, trembling fingers, the kind of pallor that came from too many substances and too little food. Thank you for coming. I began, my voice steady despite my racing heart. Cut the crap, Madison spat. You know why we're here. That social worker said you had evidence about Grandma. What lies are you spreading now? Instead of responding, I placed a manila folder on the table and slid out the first photograph. A clear screenshot from the security camera showing Madison rifling through Grandma's purse. The color drained from her face. That's not what it looks like. It's exactly what it looks like. I placed another photo. Different day, same theft. Then another, and another. January 10th, February 3rd, March 15th, April 22nd. Should I continue? Where did you get these? Robert demanded, reaching for the photos. I pulled them back. From Grandma's security system, the one she installed after you tried to force her into signing power of the attorney papers that would have let you sell her house and lock her away. Linda gasped. We never... March 18th, 3 years ago. I produced a transcript of their recorded conversation. Quote, These things are easier when the owner cooperates. Once she's gone, if Holly makes a fuss, should I continue reading the part where Dad says I'm easily guilted? Is particularly charming. They sat in stunned silence as I laid out more evidence. Bank statements showing Madison's escalating thefts, recordings of them planning Grandma's displacement, the journal entries documenting years of neglect and greed. She knew everything, I said quietly. Every stolen dollar, every scheme every time you visited, just long enough to case the house for future renovation. She documented it all. This is entrapment, Robert blustered, recording people without their knowledge. In her own home, completely legal, unlike stealing from an elderly woman with dementia? I looked at Madison. 30,000 in theft. Another 42,000 in loans never repaid. That's felony territory. Derek shifted uncomfortably. Madison, you said your grandmother was loaded, that she wouldn't miss... Shut up, she hissed at him. There's more. I pulled out the coup de grace screenshots of Madison's texts to friends bragging about her thefts, calling Grandma the old bat, planning to contest the will before Grandma was even sick. The silence stretched until a waiter approached. I waved him off, maintaining eye contact with my family. Well, here's what's going to happen, I said, channeling every boardroom presentation I'd ever given. You're going to stop all harassment immediately. No more social media posts, no more visits to my work, no more family ambushes at the house. Complete radio silence. Or what? Madison challenged, though her voice lacked conviction. Or I take this evidence to the police and press charges for elder abuse, theft, and fraud. I've already consulted with a prosecutor who says the case is, quote, a slam dunk. You wouldn't, Linda breathed. The scandal. Try me. I locked eyes with my mother. You care more about reputation than you ever cared about Grandma or me. Something flickered in her expression. Guilt recognition. It vanished too quickly to identify. Additionally, I continued, you'll sign documents acknowledging the validity of Grandma's will and waiving any future claims to the estate. Mr. Brennan has already prepared the papers. This is extortion, Robert said. No, this is consequence. I pulled out Grandma's journal, opened to a specific page. Would you like me to read the entry about finding Madison passed out in the bathroom after stealing Grandma's pain medication? The one where Grandma nursed her through withdrawal while Madison's own parents ignored her addiction. Madison's tough facade crumbled. She wrote about that. She wrote about everything. How she paid for your rehab 3 times, covered your rent for 2 years, bought your groceries when you spent food money on pills. She loved you despite your theft, but she saw you clearly. I turned to my parents. She also wrote about you too, how you visited only when you needed money, how you measured her rooms while she was still living in them, how you discussed her death like a business merger. The waiter approached again, sensing tension. This time, I smiled at him. We're fine, thank you. Just finishing up. When he left, I placed a final document on the table. There's one more thing you should know. Grandma left me a letter explaining why Robert was always so cold to me. I met his eyes. She told me about James Chen. The effect was immediate. Linda went white. Robert's face flushed purple. Madison looked confused. What about James Chen? Madison asked. Nothing that matters now, I said quickly, having no desire to detonate that bomb in public. But it explains a lot about family dynamics. Grandma kept everyone's secrets. The least you can do is respect her final wishes. Robert's voice came out strangled. She told you everything. I let that sink in. But I'm willing to keep that information private just like Grandma did. All I want is peace. Sign the papers, leave me alone, and we can all move forward separately. I need money, Madison said desperately. I wasn't lying about being evicted. Derek's kicking me out. You owe me $12,000, Derek interjected. I'm done enabling this. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a check. $5,000, the amount Grandma left you in her will. It's what she thought was fair considering everything else she'd already given you. Madison stared at the check like it might bite her. That's all. It's more than you deserve. I softened my tone slightly. Grandma loved you, Madison, even knowing about the theft, the lies, the manipulation. She still left you something. That's the kind of person she was. Tears finally came, real ones this time. I know I screwed up. The pills made me. I wasn't myself. You've been clean for 3 years according to your Instagram. The thefts continued. At some point, you can't blame the drugs anymore. I pushed the legal documents across the table. Sign these and it's over. No criminal charges, no public humiliation, no dragging Grandma's memory through court. Just over. They signed one by one. Madison first handshaking as she scrawled her name. Linda next not meeting my eyes. Robert last his signature angry slashes on the page. The check, Madison asked quietly. I handed it to her. Grandma would want you to use it wisely, maybe actually get help this time. As they prepared to leave, Linda lingered. Holly, about James. I don't want to discuss it. Not now, maybe not ever. She nodded, tears threatening her perfect makeup. I'm sorry for all of it. I know that doesn't mean much now. You're right, it doesn't. They filed out one by one, Derek muttering about wasted time, Madison clutching the check like a lifeline, Robert refusing to look back. Linda paused at the door, seemed about to speak, then left without another word. I remained at the table, adrenaline slowly fading, leaving exhaustion in its wake. The waiter appeared immediately. Can I get you anything? Miss, you look like you could use a drink. Coffee, I said. Strongest you have. As I waited, I pulled out my phone and unblocked the family numbers long enough to send a group text. The papers are signed. Our business is concluded. Any further contact will be considered harassment and met with legal action. I wish you all well separately from me. Then I blocked them again, this time knowing it was permanent. The coffee arrived dark and bitter and perfect. I thought about Grandma, how she'd spent decades navigating these toxic dynamics with grace I could never match. But she'd also given me permission to handle things differently. Your way was kinder, I murmured to her memory, but sometimes kind isn't what people need. Sometimes they need consequences. My phone buzzed, a text from Patricia at work. Hey, saw your mom's post about family drama. You? Okay. Remember, you've got friends here who actually appreciate you. Then another from Jennifer. Thinking of you today. Rose would be proud of how you're handling everything. Tea tomorrow. And one from Mr. Brennan. Documents received and filed. Congratulations on your freedom, Miss Whitman. Freedom. That's what this was. Not just from harassment or legal challenges, but from the obligation to love people who'd never truly loved me back. Grandma had given me permission to walk away, and I'd finally taken it. I finished my coffee, left a generous tip, and walked out into the afternoon sunshine. The Victorian house waited for me no longer, Grandma's house, but mine. A place to build the life she'd always wanted for me, surrounded by chosen family instead of toxic blood. The vultures had been fed just enough to fly away. Now, finally, I could begin to heal. The peace lasted exactly 4 days. Friday morning, I woke to my phone buzzing with notifications from co-workers, friends, even acquaintances I hadn't spoken to in years. My stomach dropped as I opened the first message from Patricia. Holly, call me immediately. Don't go online until we talk. Of course, I went online immediately. Madison had created a website, The Truth About Holly Whitman. The landing page featured a photo of me from Grandma's funeral, edited to make me look sinister, with bold text declaring how I manipulated my sick grandmother and stole my sister's inheritance. The site was sophisticated, not some hastily thrown together blog. Professional design, multiple pages, even a donation button to help Madison seek justice. She'd written a 12-page manifesto detailing my supposed crimes, isolating Grandma, poisoning family relationships, forging documents. Everything we'd accused her of, she projected onto me. But the worst part was the photos. Somehow she'd gotten pictures from inside the Victorian house, recent ones, showing my belongings in Grandma's rooms. She must have kept a key entered while I was at work. The violation made my skin crawl. My work phone rang. "Holly, it's Patricia. I'm so sorry, but you need to come in. The CEO received multiple emails about this website, and HR wants to discuss potential impact on the company's reputation." I dressed mechanically, mind racing. Madison had been strategic timing this for maximum impact. She'd tagged our company's social media accounts, ensuring they'd see it immediately. Several clients were mentioned by name as people who should reconsider doing business with someone capable of elder abuse. The drive to work felt surreal. At red lights, I saw people in neighboring cars looking at their phones, wondering if they were reading Madison's lies. By the time I reached the office, my hands were shaking. The HR meeting was a blur of legal speak about reputational risk and social media policies. They weren't firing me, not yet, but strongly suggested I resolve the situation quickly and quietly. My boss, Patricia, fought for me, pointing out my years of excellent work, but the damage was spreading. Back at my desk, I found an email from an unknown address. "Check your Instagram." Madison had created fake accounts using my name, posting cruel messages about family members, charity organizations Grandma had supported, even local businesses we'd frequented. The posts were backdated, somehow making it look like I'd been horrible online for months. My real Instagram was flooded with angry messages from people who'd seen the fake accounts. Old colleagues, college friends, everyone in my network was being systematically poisoned against me. But Madison wasn't working alone anymore. The website's code revealed professional development beyond her skills. The social media campaign showed coordinated timing across platforms. Someone with resources was helping her. The answer came in a call from Mr. Brennan that afternoon. "Holly, I've been investigating the website. The domain was purchased by a company called Riverside Development LLC. They're the same group that's been buying up properties in your grandmother's neighborhood. Why would a development company help Madison?" "Because Madison promised them something. I'm guessing first option to buy the Victorian when you're forced to sell." The pieces clicked. Madison might have signed away her legal claims, but she'd found another way to force me out. If she destroyed my reputation and career, I'd have to sell the house just to survive. The developers got their prize property, and Madison got her cut. I spent the weekend documenting everything, screenshots of the fake accounts, archives of the website, records of the harassment. My lawyer, recommended by Mr. Brennan, sent cease and desist letters that were promptly ignored. Monday brought escalation. Someone had called Adult Protective Services again, this time claiming I was running an illegal elderly care facility in the Victorian. The investigator who showed up was apologetic but thorough, requiring a full inspection that took hours. Tuesday, my car tires were slashed in the office parking garage. Security footage conveniently showed nothing, the cameras having malfunctioned during that exact time window. Wednesday, the fake social media campaign reached local news. A blogger picked up the story. "Inheritance battle turns, ugly local woman accused of elder abuse." They'd interviewed Madison, who appeared tearful and convincing, holding photos of her and Grandma from years ago when she still visited occasionally. By Thursday, I'd received notice from 3 clients requesting different account managers. My presence had become problematic for their brand image. Patricia fought to keep me on staff, but I could see the writing on the wall. That evening, I sat in Grandma's garden, wondering if Madison had won after all, not through legal channels, but through the court of public opinion. My phone rang constantly, with reporters wanting my side. But anything I said would just fuel the controversy. Then Jennifer arrived along with Patricia from work, Mrs. Henderson from next door, and surprisingly, Aunt Sarah. "We're not letting her win," Jennifer announced, settling into a garden chair like a general planning battle strategy. "What can you do?" She's destroyed my reputation. No, Patricia said firmly. She's created noise. We're going to create truth. They'd been busy. Jennifer had contacted every healthcare worker who'd helped with Grandma collecting testimonials about my devoted care. Mrs. Henderson had rallied the neighborhood gathering stories about my Sunday visits spanning years. Patricia had documented my work history, showing a pattern of integrity inconsistent with Madison's claims. But Aunt Sarah's contribution was the most powerful. I've been weak, she admitted, pulling out a thick folder, staying silent to avoid family drama, but Rose wouldn't want this. The folder contained letters from Grandma spanning decades discussing her children's neglect, Madison's addiction, and theft, her growing closeness with me. There's more, Sarah continued. I have recordings from family events. Madison bragging about manipulating Rose, your parents discussing the house like she was already dead. I was always the family documenter, and I documented everything. We spent hours planning a counteroffensive, not a defensive response, but an aggressive revelation of truth. Jennifer would create a website, The Real Rose Whitman Story, featuring testimonials from healthcare workers, neighbors, and friends. Patricia would leverage her media connections to ensure balanced coverage. Mrs. Henderson would organize neighborhood support. But first, I had a visit to make. Friday afternoon, I drove to the offices of Riverside Development, LLC. The receptionist tried to stop me, but I walked past her to the conference room where I could see Madison through glass walls meeting with men in expensive suits. Madison, I said, entering without knocking, we need to talk. The developers looked annoyed, but Madison went pale. How did you find... Same way I found evidence of your thefts. I learned from Grandma to document everything. I placed a folder on the table, including your agreement with Riverside to split the profits when you force me to sell. One of the suits, clearly the leader, leaned back. I don't know what you think you know. I know you're backing Madison's harassment campaign in exchange for first option on the Victorian. I know you've provided web developers, social media experts, even private investigators. I know you think forcing me out through reputation destruction is easier than a legal battle. I pulled out my phone showing it was recording. I also know that conspiracy to commit harassment, defamation, and intentional infliction of emotional distress are serious charges, especially when there's a paper trail. Madison grabbed for my phone, but I pulled it back. Here's what's going to happen. I continued echoing my ultimatum from the restaurant, but with harder edges. The website comes down today, the fake accounts get deleted, the harassment stops completely, or I don't just go to the police, I go to the FBI's real estate fraud division with evidence of your conspiracy to force a property sale through criminal means. The lead suit smiled condescendingly. You're bluffing, you don't have... I played an audio file on my phone Madison's voice recorded at their previous meeting discussing percentages and timeline for forcing me out. Their faces changed as they realized their conference room had been bugged. Your cleaning service is very chatty, I said, especially when they find recording devices that aren't supposed to be there. They assumed corporate espionage and called the police. I convinced them to give me the recordings first. The truth was simpler. The cleaner was Mrs. Henderson's daughter who'd placed the recorder for me, but they didn't need to know that. 1 hour, I said, standing. The website goes dark or everything goes public. And Madison? The $5,000 check I gave you, I've stopped payment. Consider it payment for a lesson Grandma taught me to document everything, but she also taught me when to fight back. I left them scrambling the suits, already pulling out phones Madison, crying real tears this time. By the time I got home, the website was gone. The fake accounts vanished over the next few hours. My phone stopped ringing with reporter calls. But we continued with our plans anyway. Jennifer's website went live that weekend, featuring video testimonials from 23 people whose lives Grandma had touched. Healthcare workers praised my dedication. Neighbors shared memories of our Sunday gardening. Even the mailman contributed a story about how I'd helped Grandma continue sending birthday cards when her hands became too shaky to write addresses. The narrative shifted within days. The blogger who'd first covered Madison's claims published a follow-up, The Granddaughter Who Showed Up How Love Beats Greed. Local news picked up the positive story. My clients quietly requested I return to their accounts. Madison made one last attempt showing up at the Victorian on a Sunday afternoon. I found her in the garden standing where Grandma used to plant tomatoes. "I'm not here to fight," she said quietly. I used to love this garden when I was little." I remember I said, surprising myself by not immediately ordering her to leave. "I screwed up everything. With Grandma, with you, with my whole life." She touched a rose bloom gently. "Did you know she tried to teach me to garden? I was too impatient. Wanted immediate results." "That sounds right." Madison turned to face me. "I know you hate me. I know I earned it. But I wanted you to know, the website going after your job, that wasn't supposed to happen. The developers said they'd just pressure you a little, make you want to sell. I didn't know they'd go that far. You gave them ammunition and pointed them at the target. You don't get to claim innocence about where the bullets landed." She nodded, tears falling freely. Grandma saw me clearly, a taker, not a giver. I kept thinking if I got the house, I'd become who she wanted me to be, like the building would transform me. That's not how it works. I know that now. She pulled out an envelope. "The developers paid me $10,000 to help them. I'm in rehab again, actual rehab this time. This is the admission paperwork. I wanted you to know I'm trying." I took the envelope but didn't open it. "Why tell me?" "Because you're the only family I have left who might eventually forgive me. Not today, not soon, but maybe someday." She walked toward the gate, pausing at the threshold. "Grandma would be proud of how you fought back. She always said you were stronger than you knew." After she left, I sat in the garden until sunset, processing the strange encounter. My phone buzzed with messages from my support network, checking in, offering dinners and companionship. The family I'd chosen versus the family I'd been born into. The Victorian house stood strong behind me, no longer under threat. My reputation was recovering, my job secure. The vultures had been driven off, their conspiracy collapsed. But victory felt hollow without Grandma to share it with. Then Mrs. Henderson appeared with a pot of tea and 2 cups. "Thought you might need company. I saw Madison leave." We sat in comfortable silence, sipping tea as the stars emerged. Finally, Mrs. Henderson spoke. "Rose used to say the hardest battles aren't against cruelty, but against the hope that cruel people will change." Did she think they could change? She thought anyone could change, but not everyone would choose to. The difference between can and will is where hearts break. I thought about Madison in rehab, my parents' silence, since signing the papers, the family I'd lost, versus the community I'd gained. Grandma had left me more than money or property. She'd left me the wisdom to know when to fight and when to release, when to document and when to act. "Thank you," I told Mrs. Henderson, "for everything." "That's what real family does," she said, simply refilling our cups as the evening deepened into night. 3 months after the battle with Madison and Riverside Development ended, I finally felt ready to truly make the Victorian mine. The house had sheltered me through war. Now it was time to transform it for peace. I hired contractors recommended by Mrs. Henderson's son, a reliable crew who specialized in historical restoration. "We'll be careful with everything," the foreman Marcus assured me. "These old Victorians have character. Our job is to preserve that while updating what needs updating." The plan was simple: renovate the kitchen and bathrooms, repair the aging roof, and convert the attic into a proper office space. Nothing that would change the house's essential character, just improvements to make it more livable for decades to come. We started with the master bedroom, Grandma's room, which I'd barely touched since her passing. The contractors needed to repair water damage in one corner where an old pipe had been slowly leaking. "Ma'am," Marcus called from upstairs on the 3rd day of work, "you need to see this." I found him in the master bedroom, a section of wall panel removed. Behind it, where there should have been empty space and insulation, was a metal safe built directly into the wall structure. "This isn't on any of the house blueprints," Marcus said, clearly excited by the discovery. "This is old work, maybe from the original construction. See how the metalwork matches the Victorian-era fixtures." My hands shook as I examined the safe. It was smaller than the one in Grandma's study, with an old-style combination lock. No modern electronics, just solid craftsmanship from an era when things were built to last forever. "Do you want us to call a locksmith?" Marcus asked. "No, let me think." I sat on Grandma's bed, staring at the hidden safe. She'd never mentioned this, not in her letter, not in her recordings, but then I remembered something from one of our Sunday conversations years ago. "Holly," she'd said while showing me Grandpa's workshop, "William loved puzzles. He hid love notes all over this house when we were newlyweds. I'd find them in flower canisters, behind picture frames, inside book pages. He said our love story deserved to be discovered in pieces, like a treasure hunt." A treasure hunt. I went to Grandma's jewelry box and found what I was looking for: Grandpa's pocket watch, which Grandma had kept wound and running all these years. Engraved on the back was their wedding date, 06/14/61. The safe opened on the first try. Inside were bundles of letters tied with ribbon-yellowed photographs and several leather journals. But what caught my eye first was a manila envelope labeled in Grandpa's handwriting, "For the grandchild who loves Rose the way she deserves." My throat tightened. Grandpa had died when I was barely a teenager. How could he have known? I opened the envelope carefully. Inside was a handwritten letter dated just months before his death. "Listen, dear one," it began. "If you're reading this, then you've found my secret and proven yourself worthy of it. I don't know which grandchild you'll be, but I know you'll be the one who stayed when staying was hard, who loved when loving took effort." The letter continued. "I've watched my son Robert grow cold with ambition, seen his wife Linda measure love in dollars. I've seen Madison still young, but already calculating, already grasping. But I have faith that somewhere in our family's future, someone will love Rose the way she deserves to be loved. That person should know the whole truth." What followed was a revelation that recontextualized everything. Grandpa wrote about discovering Rose's first pregnancy before they married a child, given up for adoption in an era when unwed mothers faced ruin. How they'd searched for that child later but never found them. How the loss haunted Rose, making her pour extra love into Robert, trying to fill a void that couldn't be filled. "Oh, she overcompensated," Grandpa wrote. "Gave him too much, forgave too easily, created a son who expected everything and appreciated nothing. But the child she gave up, that baby, was adopted by a loving family, grew up to become a pediatric surgeon. His name is James Chen." My blood ran cold. James Chen, my biological father according to Grandma's letter, but that would mean... I grabbed the journals, flipping through pages of Grandpa's careful documentation. He'd hired private investigators, tracked down adoption records, discovered the truth decades ago. Rose's first child had grown up well, had a family of his own, including a daughter named Holly. "I never told Rose," Grandpa's letter explained. "How could I? Your son's wife had an affair with your firstborn child. It would have destroyed her. But I made sure to watch over you, Holly. Made sure Rose got to know you. Those Sunday lunches when you were little, I suggested them. The college fund that appeared from a distant relative, that was me." I sat surrounded by evidence of a love story more complex than I'd ever imagined. Grandpa had discovered that his wife's lost child had fathered her granddaughter. Instead of revealing the devastating truth, he'd orchestrated opportunities for Rose to know me, to love me, to eventually choose me. "The greatest tragedy," his letter continued, "is that Robert, the son Rose kept and gave everything to, became a stranger, while you, the granddaughter she didn't know she was connected to by blood, became her true daughter. Life has a poetry to it, even when that poetry cuts deep. The journals contained more details: how Grandpa had anonymously helped James Chen through medical school, how he'd watched from afar as Linda's affair produced me, how he'd seen in baby Holly a chance for Rose to unknowingly reclaim the child she'd lost. "I'm dying," the final entry read. "Rose will struggle without me. Robert will disappoint her. Madison will hurt her, but Holly will save her. The bloodline found its way home through a twisted path, but it found its way. When I'm gone, make sure Holly stays close to Rose. She's going to need her true grandchild, even if she never knows the full truth." I called Marcus, told him to stop work for the day. I needed to process this alone. After they left, I sat in Grandma's kitchen trying to understand the full picture. Grandma had given up James Chen for adoption. James grew up, became successful, had an affair with Linda. I was born from that affair. Grandpa discovered everything, but kept quiet instead, ensuring I stayed in Grandma's life, which meant I was actually Grandma's biological grandchild, more directly than Madison, who was only connected through Robert. The granddaughter who'd earned her love through actions was also the granddaughter connected by the bloodline everyone thought I lacked. The irony was staggering. Madison and my parents had lorded their real family status over me, never knowing I was more directly Rose's descendant than any of them. But Grandma had chosen me, without knowing this truth, had loved me for who I was not, whose blood I carried. I found another envelope in the safe, this one in Grandma's handwriting, dated just a year ago. "Found your grandfather's secret. My heart is too full for words. All these years you were mine by blood and choice both. But it was the choice that mattered. Love always is. Don't tell the others. Let them live with their definitions of family while we know the truth. Family is made by showing up, not showing DNA. All my love, Grandma Rose." So she had known at least near the end. Found Grandpa's hidden safe during one of her clear periods. Discovered that the granddaughter she'd chosen was the granddaughter she'd lost before she was even born. The child given up had returned to her through a granddaughter's love. I spent hours going through the safe's contents: love letters between Rose and William spanning 60 years, photos of James Chen growing up taken by private investigators showing a boy who looked remarkably like me, medical records confirming the bloodline, legal documents Grandpa had prepared but never filed, ready to prove my true parentage if ever needed. But at the bottom of everything lay a simple note in Grandpa's handwriting: "Love finds a way." As evening fell, I called Mr. Brennan, asking him to come immediately. He arrived within an hour, and I showed him everything. "My God," he breathed, examining the documents. "This changes... Well, legally it changes nothing. The will stands as written. But personally, I'm not telling them," I decided. "Madison and my parents, they don't deserve this truth. They spent years telling me I wasn't real family while I was the most real family of all." What about James Chen? I'd been thinking about that. Maybe someday, when I'm ready. He doesn't know Robert isn't my father. That conversation, it's not one I'm prepared for yet. Mr. Brennan helped me document everything properly, creating copies for safekeeping. Then I returned everything to the safe and had Marcus seal it back into the wall. Some secrets deserved to stay hidden until the right moment. That night, I called Jennifer and asked her to come over. Sitting in Grandma's garden under stars, I shared the discovery. She listened without interrupting, then simply held me while I cried. For Grandma, for Grandpa, for the teenage Rose who'd given up a baby for the family that had found its way back together through impossible circumstances. "She chose you before she knew," Jennifer said softly. "That's what matters. Not the blood, but the choice." I thought about Madison, probably still in rehab, convinced she'd been cheated of her birthright. About Robert and Linda living with their cold marriage and colder hearts, never knowing Linda's affair had produced the only grandchild who'd truly loved Rose. about James Chen, the successful surgeon who had no idea his biological mother had spent 10 years being loved by the daughter he'd never claimed. But mostly, I thought about Sunday afternoons in this garden. Grandma and me planting flowers and sharing stories, neither of us knowing we were connected by more than choice, but both of us knowing that choice was enough. The renovation continued over the following weeks. Marcus and his crew restored the Victorian to its former glory while updating it for modern life. I kept Grandpa's safe sealed in the wall, a secret within a secret, protecting the truth about our twisted, beautiful family tree. Madison eventually sent a letter from rehab 6 months sober and working on what she called radical accountability. She wrote about understanding finally that love couldn't be stolen or demanded, only given and received. I wrote back briefly, wishing her well. Maybe someday I'd tell her the truth about our bloodlines, but not yet. She needed to find her own worth beyond inheritance and birthright. My parents remained silent, their shame or anger keeping them away, just as well. They'd shown their true colors, and those colors had no place in the warm, welcoming home I was creating. The Victorian house site of so many secrets and revelations became a gathering place for chosen family. Sunday dinners replaced Sunday visits with Jennifer, Mrs. Henderson, Patricia from work, and others filling the rooms with laughter. Grandma's spirit lived on in every meal, shared every story, told every moment of connection that proved family was made by presence, not presents. But late at night, alone in the master bedroom, I sometimes opened the hidden safe just to touch the truth. The granddaughter who'd earned love through devotion was the granddaughter who'd shared blood all along. The family who'd rejected me had rejected their truest member. And somewhere out there, a surgeon named James Chen had no idea his biological mother had loved his daughter with all the fierce devotion of a grandmother who'd waited a lifetime to reclaim what she'd lost. Love had indeed found a way. Through affairs and adoptions, through Sundays and secrets, through choices and chances, love had brought Rose's bloodline home. The fact that neither of us had known just made the choosing that much more precious. I locked the safe, spun the combination, and went to tend Grandma's roses in the garden, where our story had bloomed one Sunday at a time. Thanksgiving arrived with unseasonable warmth, the kind of November day that made San Francisco feel like endless summer. I decided to host dinner at the Victorian, filling Grandma's table with chosen family rather than blood relatives. Jennifer helped with cooking. Mrs. Henderson brought her famous sweet potato casserole, and Patricia arrived with 2 bottles of excellent wine and her girlfriend Maria. We were just setting the table when my phone rang. Aunt Sarah. "Holly, I know this is last minute, but could I come? I have someone with me, someone who needs to see you." An hour later, Sarah arrived accompanied by a woman in her 80s, elegant, despite her age, moving with the careful precision of someone preserving their strength. My breath caught. "Well, Holly," Sarah said gently, "this is your great-aunt Dorothy Rose's sister. She flew in from Florida yesterday." Dorothy studied me with eyes exactly like Grandma's, the same sharp blue that missed nothing. "So you're the one," she said finally, "the granddaughter who showed up." We settled in the living room while the others continued dinner preparations, giving us privacy. Dorothy pulled out a packet of letters, her hands trembling slightly. "Rose wrote to me every month for 60 years, she began. We had our troubles, silly sister spats that calcified into stubborn silence, but the letters never stopped. She handed me one dated 2 years ago. Read this." Grandma's handwriting filled the pages describing our Sundays, my devotion, her growing recognition that I was different from Madison and Robert. But one paragraph stood out. "Dorothy, I've discovered something that would sound like madness if I hadn't confirmed it myself. Holly is Jamie's child. My grandson's wife had an affair with the son I gave up. The world has a strange sense of humor, returning my firstborn's child to me as a granddaughter who loves me most. William New hid it to spare me pain. but I'm grateful now. The child I lost came home through Holly. Dorothy watched my face as I processed this. You knew, I asked, about James Chen. I was there when she had him, Dorothy said quietly. 19 years old, terrified our parents, ready to disown her. I held her hand when they took him away. She never forgave herself even after marrying William, even after having Robert. The guilt ate at her. When did she find out about me? About a year before she died. She found William's papers during one of her clear periods. Called me crying, but they were tears of joy. Her bloodline had found its way home without her knowing. She said it proved love was stronger than planning. Dorothy pulled out another letter, this one dated just weeks before Grandma's death. If something happens to me, make sure Holly knows she was chosen before I knew and loved after I knew. Make sure she understands that blood meant nothing compared to those Sunday visits, but also make sure she knows she carries the best of our family forward. Not Robert's coldness or Madison's greed, but the determination of a 19-year-old girl who gave up everything to give her baby a chance. We talked for another hour, Dorothy filling in gaps about young Rose, about the child given up, about the decades of hidden grief. When we finally joined the others for dinner, I felt oddly complete, as if pieces of my history had finally clicked into place. Dinner was joyous, full of laughter and gratitude. Dorothy charmed everyone with stories of Rose as a teenager, wild and rebellious before life tempered her spirit. We were just serving dessert when the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Madison standing on the porch, looking healthier than I'd seen her in years. Behind her stood a man I recognized from photographs hidden in Grandpa's safe, James Chen. I'm sorry, Madison said quickly. I know I'm not welcome, but I've been in touch with someone you need to meet. James stepped forward and I saw my own features reflected in his face. Same nose, same stubborn chin, same eyes that missed nothing. Madison found me, he said, voice carefully controlled. Told me a story about inheritance and family drama, but the more she talked, the more wrong things sounded. So I did my own research. He held up a folder. DNA test results. Seems Robert Whitman isn't your biological father. The porch suddenly felt too small. Behind me, I heard Dorothy's sharp intake of breath. You'd better come in, I managed. What followed was the most surreal Thanksgiving of my life. James Chen, the renowned pediatric surgeon, sat at Grandma's table learning he was her son. Madison watched wide-eyed as the family mythology crumbled and reformed. Dorothy wept as she met the nephew taken at birth. She never forgot you, Dorothy told James. Celebrated your birthday every year in private, June 14th. That's actually my birthday. The adoption agency told my parents it was July 1st. She knew, Dorothy said simply. Mother's intuition. She always knew. I showed James the contents of Grandpa's safe, watching his composed surgeon's facade crack as he read about William Whitman's secret support at the anonymous medical school funding the quiet guardianship from afar. He knew about my affair with Linda, James asked, staring at the evidence. He knew everything, I confirmed, but he protected everyone, made sure I stayed in Grandma's life without revealing why. Madison had been uncharacteristically quiet through the revelations. Finally, she spoke. So Holly is actually more Grandma's grandchild than I am. By blood, yes, I said carefully, but that's not what mattered to Grandma. No, Madison agreed, surprising me. What mattered was showing up. She looked at me directly. 8 months sober, actually working the program this time. My sponsor says I need to make amends, but how do you make amends for a lifetime of taking? You start by acknowledging it, Jennifer said gently. Then you change the behavior. The evening evolved into something unexpected. James, overwhelmed by learning about his birth, Mother asked endless questions that Dorothy answered with patience. Madison, stripped of her victim narrative, seemed almost relieved to stop performing. The chosen family I'd assembled welcomed the blood family with cautious grace. I specialized in pediatric surgery because of a memory, James said eventually. Being very young, maybe 3, and a woman singing to me. Not my adoptive mother. Someone else. The melody stayed with me. Dorothy gasped. The Mockingbird song. Rose sang it constantly when you were a baby. The agency let her hold you for one day before James broke down, then the composed doctor becoming the child who'd been given away. I found myself comforting the father I'd never known while Madison held Dorothy's hand, and the friends who'd become family witnessed blood ties revealed and reformed. As midnight approached and guests began leaving, James lingered. I need time to process this, but Holly, I'd like to know you, if you're willing. I'd like that too. Madison was the last to leave. I know you have every reason to hate me, she said, but I wanted to do one thing right. James had been searching for his birth mother for years. When I found out about the connection, it seemed like something Grandma would want. Thank you, I said, meaning it. That took courage. Courage or desperation? I'm not sure anymore. She looked around the Victorian's entrance. You've made it beautiful. It feels like her again. You're welcome to visit when you're ready, when I'm ready. She nodded, understanding the qualified invitation. I'm living in a sober house now, working at a garden center, if you can believe it. Turns out I inherited Grandma's green thumb after all. Just took me 35 years to use it for something besides grasping. After everyone left, I sat alone in the kitchen where so many truths had been revealed. The Victorian felt different now. Fuller somehow, as if the ghosts of secrets had finally been laid to rest. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I almost ignored it, then saw the preview. This is James. Thank you for dinner. I've been looking for her my whole life, never knowing she was looking for me too. Your grandfather was right. Love finds a way. I poured a glass of wine and took it to the garden sitting on the bench where Grandma and I had spent countless Sunday afternoons. The roses bloomed out of season, confused by the warm November, or perhaps celebrating the family reunion decades in the making. You knew it, I whispered to the night air. At the end, you knew everything, and you still chose love over anger, forgiveness over bitterness. Even for Madison, even for the parents who disappointed you, you chose love. A warm breeze stirred the roses, carrying their perfume across the garden. Somewhere in that sweetness, I could almost hear Grandma's voice. Family isn't about blood, dear one, but sometimes when you're very lucky, the family you choose turns out to share your blood after all. That's not coincidence. That's grace. I raised my glass to the stars. Happy Thanksgiving, Grandma. Your firstborn son knows your name. Your granddaughters are finding peace. Your house is full of love, not bad for a woman who started with loss. The garden held its breath, then released it in a shower of rose petals, pink and white, cascading like confetti. Whether wind or wonder, I chose to see it as approval, as blessing, as Grandma Rose having the last word in a story that had begun with a teenage girl's heartbreak and ended with a grandmother's triumph. Love had indeed found a way. Crooked and complicated, painful and perfect, but ultimately leading everyone home. 6 months after that transformative Thanksgiving, I stood in probate court for what Mr. Brennan assured me would be the final hearing. The Victorians' ownership had been officially transferred, all challenges dismissed, but California law required this final procedural closing. I'd arrived early, wanting everything done properly. Madison entered just as proceedings began, looking professional in a simple navy suit. She'd maintained her sobriety, the hollow desperation replaced by something quieter, more grounded. She nodded at me, but kept her distance, respecting the boundaries we'd established. Case number 4729, the matter of Rose Marie Whitman's estate, the clerk announced. Judge Harrison, a woman in her 60s, with kind eyes, reviewed the files. I see all previous challenges have been withdrawn. Ms. Holly Whitman, you're the sole beneficiary. Yes, Your Honor. And Ms. Madison Carter, you've withdrawn all claims. Madison stood. Yes, Your Honor, completely and without reservation. The judge studied us both. It's refreshing to see an inheritance dispute resolved without prolonged litigation. Ms. Whitman, do you have anything you'd like to add for the record? I thought about everything. The Sundays, the secrets, the revelations about bloodlines and choices. Only that my grandmother was a wise woman who knew exactly what she was doing. Her will reflected her wishes, and I'm honored to carry them forward. Ms. Carter, Madison took a breath. My grandmother tried to teach me that love is earned through presence, not demanded through blood. It took me too long to understand that lesson. I'm grateful my sister has given me the chance to learn it now. Sister, the first time she'd use that word without sarcasm or manipulation. After the judge closed the case, officially ending any possible challenges to Grandma's will, Madison approached me outside the courthouse. I wanted to tell you in person. I got promoted at the garden center, assistant manager. It's not much, but it's honest work. She smiled wryly. Turns out I'm good at helping things grow when I'm not trying to steal them. Grandma would be proud. Maybe, eventually. She pulled out an envelope. I've been saving. This is $1,000 toward what I stole. I know it doesn't begin to cover it, but Derek's lawyer says if I document repayment attempts, it shows accountability. I looked at the envelope, then at my sister. Really looked at her. The manipulative mask was gone, replaced by something raw but real. Keep it, I decided. Put it toward your own place. Grandma already gave you $5,000. Consider us even. Madison's eyes welled. Holly, I can't just... Yes, you can, but there's a condition. I pulled out my phone, showing her my calendar. Sunday dinners, once a month. You come to the Victorian, we cook together, and we talk. Not about the past, but about who we're becoming. Like you and Grandma. Like me and Grandma. She accepted with tears streaming down her face, and we set our first dinner for the following weekend. That evening, I met James at the Victorian. We'd been meeting regularly, carefully building a relationship that acknowledged our biological connection without forced intimacy. He'd brought photo albums this time, sharing his life story. Medical school, marriage, his own children who were technically my half-siblings. I've been thinking about inheritance, he said as we sat in Grandma's parlor. Not money or property, but traits, characteristics. You have her kindness, Holly, but also her steel backbone. It's remarkable considering I never raised you. Nature versus nurture, I mused. Grandpa made sure I stayed close to her. Maybe that shaped me more than genetics. William Whitman was a remarkable man. To discover his wife's secret pain, then orchestrate healing without revealing the wound. That takes a special kind of love. We talked until late, and as James prepared to leave, he paused at the door. I'm meeting with Robert and Linda tomorrow. They don't know the truth yet, but I think it's time. They deserve to know why their marriage really fell apart. Are you sure? Secrets have a way of poisoning families. Look how much damage came from everyone not knowing the truth. Besides, he smiled sadly, I'm tired of Linda calling me for medical advice while hiding that we share a daughter. The next afternoon, my phone exploded with calls from blocked numbers. I ignored them all until Mr. Brennan called. Your parents know, he said simply. James told them everything. Robert's filed for divorce. Linda's been calling my office demanding to challenge the will based on... Well, I'm not sure she understands that being your biological grandfather actually strengthens James's theoretical claim, not hers. Is she going to be a problem? No, I explained that any challenge would require public disclosure of the affair, the secret adoption, all of it. She retreated quickly after that. 3 days later, Robert appeared at the Victorian. I found him standing in the driveway, looking older than his years, staring at the house like he'd never seen it before. 35 years, he said without preamble. 35 years of marriage, and it was all based on a lie. I'm sorry, I said, meaning it despite everything. No one should find out that way. Did you know all this time when we were fighting about the inheritance, did you know you were actually Mom's blood granddaughter? I found out after she died. Grandpa hid evidence in the house. Grandma discovered it near the end. He laughed bitterly. So the daughter I pushed away was the only real family I had. The wife I defended was… God, I'm an idiot. You couldn't have known. Couldn't I? He looked at me directly, for maybe the first time in my life. You look just like him. James. Same eyes, same stubborn chin. Part of me always knew something was off, but I didn't want to see it. We stood awkwardly in the driveway, two people who'd shared a house, but never really known each other. I failed you, he said finally. Failed as a father, failed as a son, failed pretty much all around. We all make choices, I replied carefully. You can make different ones now. Can I? He gestured at the Victorian. I spent years plotting to take this from Mom, then from you. What kind of person does that make me? A person who can change, if they choose to. He left without coming inside, but something in his shoulders suggested a weight lifting. Sometimes the harshest truths bring the cleanest breaks. That Sunday, Madison came for our first dinner. She arrived early, helping me prep vegetables while we navigated the strange new territory of sisters, trying to actually be sisters. I've been thinking about Grandma's letter. She said julienning carrots with surprising skill, the one where she said she documented everything out of heartbreak, not bitterness. I get that now. It hurts to see yourself clearly. But it's the only way to change. Yeah, she smiled ruefully. 10 years of therapy in 5 words. You should charge by the session. We cooked Grandma's pot roast recipe, filling the house with familiar smells. As we worked, Madison shared stories from rehab, the slow recognition of patterns, the harder work of changing them. You know what the worst part was, she said as we set the table, realizing I'd become exactly what I accused everyone else of being, a taker, a user, someone who only showed up when they needed something. But you're showing up now, without needing anything. I need plenty, she corrected. Connection, forgiveness, a chance to know my sister. I just learned the difference between needing and taking. Dinner was awkward at moments, but genuinely pleasant overall. We discovered shared memories we'd forgotten. Summer afternoons in Grandma's garden before addiction and resentment poisoned everything. Holiday cookies decorated with more enthusiasm than skill. Grandpa teaching us both to whistle, though only I mastered it. As Madison prepared to leave, she paused in the entrance, where she'd once stormed out in fury. Same time next month, she asked hopefully. Same time next month. After she left, I found myself in Grandma's study looking at the photo collection that now included Thanksgiving's reunion monthly dinners with James' snapshots of the life being built in the Victorians' rooms. The house that had nearly torn our family apart had become the gathering place for its healing. My phone chimed with a text from Jennifer. How did it go with Madison? Better than expected. We're figuring it out. Rose would be proud. I thought about that as evening settled over the garden. Grandma had left me more than money or property. She'd left me the tools to rebuild what greed had broken, the wisdom to know when to hold boundaries and when to extend grace, the example of how to love when love was difficult. The doorbell rang, surprising me. Mrs. Henderson stood on the porch with a flowering plant. For your garden, she said. It's a rose of Sharon. Seemed appropriate. We planted it together in the spot where Grandma's favorite rosebush had finally succumbed to age, saying little, but understanding much. Sometimes family comes in the form of elderly neighbors who show up when showing up matters. That night, I updated my will with Mr. Brennan's help. Not because I was worried about dying, but because Grandma had taught me the value of planning. The Victorian would go to a trust for family rehabilitation services. The money would fund scholarships for children of addicts. Madison would receive enough to be secure, but not enough to stop working for her recovery. You're young for such detailed estate planning, Mr. Brennan observed. I learned from the best. Grandma knew love meant preparing for the future, even futures you won't see. As I signed the documents, I thought about cycles breaking and reforming. Madison working honestly for the first time. Robert facing truth after decades of denial. James connecting with the family he'd never known existed. Even Linda, whatever her next chapter might bring. But mostly I thought about Sunday visits that had saved us all. 10 years of showing up had created ripples far beyond what Grandma could have imagined. Or perhaps exactly what she'd imagined, planned for, orchestrated through love and will and carefully documented truth. The Victorian stood strong around me no longer. Grandma's house, or even just my house, but a home for anyone willing to do the work of becoming family. The inheritance battles were over. The real work of inheriting, becoming worthy of what we've received, had just begun. 1 year after Grandma's passing, the Victorian bloomed with new life. The garden she'd tended for decades had evolved under my care, combining her traditional roses with native California plants that attracted butterflies and hummingbirds. The house itself had been lovingly restored, each room maintaining its historical character while functioning for modern life. It was the Sunday before Thanksgiving, and I was preparing for our largest gathering yet. Madison arrived, first letting herself in with the key I'd given her 6 months earlier, a gesture that had reduced her to tears. "I brought 3 kinds of stuffing ingredients," she announced, setting bags on the kitchen counter. "Traditional cornbread and that wild rice one James mentioned loving." We developed an easy rhythm in these monthly dinners, the awkwardness replaced by genuine affection. Madison's recovery had held steady for 14 months now, and with it came a person I was just getting to know. Funny, creative, and surprisingly wise about plants. "The catering orders are insane this week," she said, tying on an apron. "Everyone wants succulents for their Thanksgiving tables. I've been potting arrangements since 5 this morning." Madison had been promoted to manager at the garden center and started a small side business creating custom plant arrangements. It wasn't the get-rich-quick schemes of her past, but honest work that she took pride in. Jennifer arrived next, followed by Mrs. Henderson and Patricia with her girlfriend Maria. The kitchen filled with chatter and purpose as everyone took on familiar tasks. This had become our tradition. The Sunday before Thanksgiving spent preparing for the larger feast, a rehearsal that had become its own celebration. "Dorothy's flight lands at 3, I reminded everyone. "James is picking her up." "I still can't believe she moved here," Madison said, carefully dicing celery. "Florida to San Francisco at 87. "She said she'd wasted enough decades staying away from family," Mrs. Henderson replied. "Smart woman." Dorothy had indeed relocated 6 months ago, taking a senior apartment close enough to visit, but maintaining her independence. She'd become the grandmother figure Madison and I had both needed, full of stories about young Rose and the wisdom that came from watching family patterns repeat and break across generations. The doorbell rang as I was checking the oven. I opened it to find Robert standing uncertainly on the porch holding a pie carrier. "Linda's mother's apple pie recipe," he said awkwardly. "I know I wasn't exactly invited, but James said you might have room for one more." I studied my father, because despite biology, that's what he'd been for 35 years. The divorce had finalized 8 months ago, and he'd used the time for what he called aggressive self-improvement. Therapy, apparently, and lots of it. "There's always room," I said, finally stepping aside, "but you're on dish duty." "Fair enough." The afternoon unfolded with the kind of organized chaos that comes from too many cooks who've learned to share a kitchen. Robert stayed mostly quiet, washing dishes as promised, occasionally offering help that was accepted with cautious grace. "This is what it was supposed to be like," Madison said at one point, surveying the busy kitchen. "Family actually enjoying each other's company." "It's what we're making it like," Jennifer corrected gently. "Nothing supposed about it, just choices." James and Dorothy arrived as the sun began setting, adding their voices to the cheerful din. Watching Dorothy and Robert navigate their new relationship, step-grandmother and abandoned son, reminded me how complicated family could be when you look beyond blood. I have an announcement, James said as we gathered for dinner. I've accepted a position at UCSF Children's Hospital. I'll be moving to the city next month. The table erupted in congratulations. Having my biological father nearby felt both strange and right, another thread in the tapestry we were weaving. There's more, he continued, smiling at me. I've been in touch with the adoption agency. There are 2 other children from Rose's line, cousins you've never met. They're interested in connecting. Madison grabbed my hand under the table, squeezing tight. More family, more complications, more possibilities for both connection and disappointment. One step at a time, Dorothy advised, reading our faces. Family isn't a sprint. Rose took 10 years to build something lasting with Holly. These things can't be rushed. After dinner, as everyone scattered to various tasks, Robert approached me in the garden, where I was cutting roses for the table. I owe you an apology, he said quietly. A real one, not the defensive garbage I've been peddling. I kept cutting, letting him find his words. I failed you in every way a father can fail a daughter. I let my suspicions about Linda poison how I saw you. I chose greed over love, entitlement over gratitude. I watched you care for Mom while planning to steal everything she wanted you to have. Oh, why tell me now? Because James asked me a question last week. If I could go back knowing everything, would I still raise you as my daughter? He met my eyes. The answer broke me, Holly, because despite knowing the truth, despite the lies and betrayal, you're still the best thing that came from my marriage, and I threw that away for pride and property. I set down the garden shears, considering this man who had been a stranger in our shared home. I can't give you absolution, I said carefully. That's work you have to do yourself, but I can give you chances to do better. Small ones with boundaries. That's more than I deserve. Yes, I agreed. It is. We returned to find the dining room transformed. Madison had created centerpieces from succulents and autumn flowers. Jennifer had lit candles throughout the space, and Dorothy was teaching James our grandmother's technique for folding napkins into roses. Before we served dessert, I announced, I want to share something. I retrieved a wooden box from Grandma's study, not the one with secrets, but one I'd created myself. Inside were copies of every letter she'd written to Dorothy over the decades, which Dorothy had allowed me to photocopy. I've been reading Grandma's letters. I explained, handing out excerpts I'd selected. She wrote about each of us, her hopes and fears, her love despite disappointment. I thought we should hear her voice tonight. We took turns reading aloud. Madison read about Grandma's joy when she was born, the dreams for her future before addiction took hold. Robert read about Grandma's pride in his early career, her confusion as ambition replaced affection. James read letters from when he was just the baby given away, chronicling decades of grief and hope. I read the final excerpt from a letter written just weeks before her death. Dorothy, I've learned something in these sunset years. Family isn't about holding on or letting go. It's about loving with open hands, ready to receive whoever chooses to stay. Holly taught me that. She stayed when staying gave her nothing but the joy of being together. Now I watch her rebuild what we broke, and I know our family story isn't ending but beginning. Love finds a way, sister. It always has. Silence settled over the room, broken finally by Dorothy's soft words. She saw it all coming. The reconciliation, the healing. Rose always did play the long game. We served dessert. Robert's apple pie, which was surprisingly good, and cookies from Grandma's recipe. Conversation drifted to safer topics. James's new position, Madison's business plans, the Victorians' ongoing restoration. As the evening wound down, I found myself on the porch with Madison watching our mismatched family through the windows. I used to hate you, she said quietly. Really, truly hate you. You had Grandma's love without even trying. I tried, I corrected. Every Sunday for 10 years. I know that now, but back then all I saw was unfairness. The good daughter getting rewarded while the mess got pushed aside. What do you see now? Madison smiled, the expression transforming her face. I see my sister who saved our family by refusing to enable its worst parts. I see the granddaughter Grandma needed. I see someone I'm proud to know even if it took me too long to deserve knowing you. We sat in comfortable silence until the November chill drove us inside. The gathering was breaking up, everyone helping with cleanup and practiced coordination. Robert worked alongside Jennifer Dorothy, directed James in proper dish drying technique, and Mrs. Henderson packed leftovers with Patricia and Maria. Same time next month became the evening's refrain as people departed. Our chosen family had developed its own traditions, its own rhythms, its own way of being together that honored the past while building something new. Madison left last, pausing at the door where so much drama had unfolded. Thank you, she said simply, for the second chance, the third chance, all the chances. Thank Grandma, I replied. She's the one who taught me they were worth giving. Alone finally, I walked through the Victorians' quiet rooms. Each space held memories now, not just of Grandma and our Sundays, but of new gatherings, fresh laughter, unexpected connections. The dining room where James had met his birth mother's sister, the kitchen where Madison and I had learned to be sisters, the garden where Robert had offered his imperfect apology. In Grandma's study, I opened the journal I'd been keeping, documenting this new chapter as carefully as she'd documented the old. Today's entry was simple. Year 1 is ending. The family that tried to tear each other apart over inheritance has become something new. Not perfect, not without scars, but real. We gather not from obligation, but choice, not for money, but for connection. Grandma's true inheritance wasn't property or portfolios, but the knowledge that love is a verb, family is a choice, and showing up is everything. The Victorian stands filled with the life she envisioned. Her roses bloom in all seasons, now tended by many hands instead of two. This is what winning looks like, not in court, but in kitchen conversations and garden silences, and the grace to give chances when chances seem impossible. The war is over. The peace is beautiful. The love finds a way. I closed the journal and placed it next to Grandma's 2 generations of women documenting the complex truth of family. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Linda had been texting, hinting at wanting connection now that her marriage had imploded. The cousins James had mentioned would complicate our carefully balanced dynamic. Madison's recovery would face tests, Robert's reformation would be tried, and my own capacity for forgiveness would stretch in ways I couldn't yet imagine. But tonight in the house that love built and stubbornness preserved, surrounded by the lingering warmth of chosen family, I felt ready for whatever came next. Grandma had given me more than an inheritance. She'd given me the tools to build something lasting from the broken pieces of what we'd been. The grandfather clock chimed midnight, marking the end of one day and the beginning of another. I turned off the lights one by one, each switch a small prayer of gratitude for Sundays that saved us, for truth that freed us, for chances that changed us, for the family we chose to become when the family we were born into chose to evolve. Good night, Grandma, I whispered to the darkness. Look what your love made possible. Look what grew from the seeds you planted with such faith. The house settled around me with familiar creaks and sighs, and I swear I heard her answer in the whisper of wind through roses. I knew you could do it, dear one. I always knew. 5 years had passed since I inherited Grandma's Victorian, and on this particular Sunday morning, I stood in the garden she'd taught me to tend, watching my 3-year-old daughter chase butterflies between the rose bushes. Charlotte Rose, named for the great-grandmother she'd never meet, but whose legacy shaped every corner of our lives. Oh, careful, sweetheart. Thomas called from the porch, ever the protective father. I'd met him 2 years after Grandma's passing, Mr. Brennan's son, who'd first appeared at that emotional Thanksgiving with flowers and hope. Our courtship had been slow and steady, built on Sunday dinners and shared values, culminating in a wedding held right here in the garden with Madison as my maid of honor. Mama, look. Charlotte held up a particularly colorful leaf, her face bright with discovery. She had Thomas's dark hair, but my eyes, Grandma's eyes that missed nothing and found joy in simple things. Beautiful baby. Should we add it to your collection? As I helped her carefully place the leaf in her treasure basket, Madison emerged from the house carrying a tray of seedlings. The greenhouse is overflowing, she announced cheerfully. I think we went overboard with the spring starts. Madison's business had flourished beyond anyone's expectations. Garden of Second Chances had grown from a small side project to a thriving enterprise with 3 locations and a program that hired people in recovery. She lived in the carriage house, now converted into a cozy apartment, maintaining her independence while staying close to family. There's no such thing as too many plants, Dorothy called from her chair under the oak tree Grandpa had planted. At 92, she moved more slowly, but insisted on attending every family gathering, dispensing wisdom and keeping us all humble with stories of young Rose. The garden began filling with our Sunday regulars. Jennifer arrived with her partner Kate and their newly adopted son. Mrs. Henderson, now in her 80s but spry as ever, brought her famous coffee cake. Patricia and Mariah came with their daughter Charlotte's best friend despite the age difference. Even Robert made his quiet entrance, still working to earn his place in this reconfigured family through consistent presence rather than grand gestures. But today's gathering was special. James had asked to bring someone, the other biological children of Rose he'd mentioned years ago. My cousins, technically, though, the word felt too simple for relationships forged in adulthood from the ashes of old secrets. They arrived together, a man and woman in their 40s who shared subtle features that marked them as family. David, a teacher from Portland. Susan, a nurse from Sacramento. Both had been given up for adoption by teenage mothers who'd had affairs with James before he knew about his own origins. This is surreal, Susan said, looking around the garden where her biological grandmother had spent decades she'd never know about. I've wondered my whole life where I came from. Rose would have loved you, Dorothy said simply. She had enough love for all the grandchildren she knew about and the ones she didn't. We settled around the long table Thomas and Robert had built together last summer, a project that had helped them find common ground. As food appeared in the casual abundance of family gatherings, I watched these new cousins navigate their first Powell Whitman Chen family dinner. It's a lot, Madison told them kindly. When Holly first invited me back, I spent the entire meal terrified of saying the wrong thing. But this family's good at second chances, and third ones, and whatever number we're on now. 14th, Robert muttered, earning a laugh from the table. His journey had been the rockiest, but therapy and time had revealed a man capable of growth when stripped of pretense and greed. Tell us about Rose, David requested. We have facts from adoption records. But who was she really? Stories flowed like wine, each person contributing their piece of the mosaic. Dorothy spoke of the determined young woman who'd given up 3 babies to give them better chances. I shared memories of Sunday visits and life lessons disguised as cookie recipes. Madison, with 5 years of sobriety, now talked about the grandmother who never gave up hope even when repeatedly betrayed. She saw people clearly, Mrs. Henderson added, but she loved them anyway, not their potential or who she wished they were, but who they actually were, flaws and all. That's rare. Charlotte, who'd been contentedly coloring at her small table, suddenly piped up, "Great Gamma Rose lives in the flowers." The adults exchanged smiles over her head. We told her stories about her namesake, and in her 3-year-old wisdom, she'd decided anyone that special must have become part of the garden itself. That's right, baby, I said. She lives in the flowers and the stories and the way we love each other. As afternoon stretched toward evening, I found myself in the kitchen with Susan washing dishes in companionable rhythm. I'm jealous, she admitted quietly. Not of the house or the money, but of the time you had with her, the Sundays. Those Sundays saved us both, I replied. But you're here now. That matters too. David and I talked about it on the drive down, how different our lives might have been if we'd known her. Known all of you? I dried a plate thoughtfully. Grandma used to say that timing is everything in gardening. Plant too early and frost kills your seedlings. Plant too late and they won't have time to bloom. Maybe we're all planted exactly when we're supposed to be. Through the window, I watched Thomas pushing Charlotte on the swing he'd hung from the oak tree, her laughter carrying on the evening breeze. Madison was showing David her greenhouse, gesturing animatedly about propagation techniques. Robert and James sat in awkward but genuine conversation, finding commonality in their shared experience of discovering biological truths late in life. "Your family's not what I expected," Susan said. "What did you expect?" "I don't know. More drama, more resentment. You all have reasons to hate each other." "We tried that," I said, remembering the bitter months after Grandma's death. "It was exhausting. This is better." As the sun began setting, we gathered in the living room for what had become our tradition, reading from Grandma's letters. Tonight I'd chosen one from late in her life, addressed to Dorothy, but meant for all of us. "Sister, I've been thinking about inheritance. We spend so much time worrying about who gets the china, the silver, the property. But real inheritance is different. It's the way Holly hums when she cooks just like Mother did. It's Madison's fierce loyalty even when misdirected. It's Robert's ambition, which could build empires if tempered with kindness. It's in grandchildren I'll never meet who carry forward pieces of who we are. Real inheritance can't be stolen or squandered, because it lives in how we choose to love each other. The house will shelter someone. The money will be spent. But the love that multiplies with each generation brave enough to choose it." "She knew," David said wonderingly. "Somehow she knew we existed." "Grandma knew a lot of things," Madison said. "She just chose when to reveal them." As people began departing with the usual promises to return next month, I noticed Charlotte had fallen asleep in Thomas's arms, clutching the leaf she'd found earlier. My daughter surrounded by the complicated, beautiful family that had formed from the wreckage of secrets and greed. James lingered, helping to stack chairs. "Thank you," he said simply, "for opening your home to them. I know it's complicated." Family is always complicated. Grandma taught me that complicated doesn't mean impossible." After everyone left, Thomas and I sat on the porch swing, Charlotte sleeping between us. The Victorian stood solid around us, no longer just Grandma's house or my house, but truly a family home. "Susan and David fit right in," Thomas observed, "like they'd always been here." "That's Grandma's magic," I said. "This house has a way of making people belong." Speaking of belonging," he shifted Charlotte carefully. "Robert asked if he could host Christmas dinner this year. His apartment's too small, but he wondered about using the dining room here, cooking for everyone." I considered it. 5 years ago, the idea would have been impossible. Even 2 years ago, it would have felt forced. But now? "Why not? Grandma always said the dining room was meant for family gatherings." Thomas kissed my temple. "You're a good person, Holly Whitman." "Holly Powell," I corrected, still enjoying my married name. "And I had a good teacher." Later, after tucking Charlotte into bed in the nursery that had once been Grandma's sewing room, I found myself in the study updating the journal I'd faithfully kept. So much had changed. Madison, sober and successful. Robert, humbled but present. New family members discovered and welcomed. A husband who understood that Sunday dinners weren't negotiable. A daughter who would grow up surrounded by the love Grandma had always envisioned. But what struck me most was how normal it all felt now. The dramatic revelations had settled into daily rhythms. The family that had once torn itself apart over inheritance now shared casual dinners and random Tuesday coffee visits. We'd become what Grandma had always hoped, people who chose each other. My phone buzzed with a text from Madison. Forgot to mention, someone called the shop today asking about the Whitman family. Said they were researching genealogy. I told them to contact you. More family. The possibility no longer frightened me. We'd proven that connection could be built from any foundation, that love could override any history, that showing up mattered more than showing DNA. I closed the journal and walked through the quiet house one last time before bed. In each room I saw not what had been, but what we'd built. The kitchen where Madison and I learned to be sisters. The dining room where enemies became family. The garden where Thomas proposed while Charlotte Tottle ran through the roses. The living room where we'd welcome strangers who shared our blood and made them relatives who shared our lives. This was Grandma's true inheritance. Not the money that had caused such grief or the house that had nearly destroyed us, but the lesson that family is built one Sunday at a time, one choice at a time, one forgiven betrayal and accepted apology at a time. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Charlotte would grow up navigating a complex family tree. Madison would face the ongoing work of recovery. Robert would continue earning trust he'd shattered. New relatives might emerge from DNA tests and adoption searches. The Victorian would need repairs, the garden constant tending the relationships, careful maintenance. But tonight in the house that love built and stubbornness preserved and forgiveness filled, I felt the deep satisfaction of a life well lived. Not perfect, but purposeful. Not without pain, but not defined by it either. "Thank you, Grandma," I whispered to the walls that had heard so many prayers, "for teaching me that inheritance isn't about what we get, but what we give. For showing me that family isn't about blood, but about showing up. For proving that love always finds a way, even if that way leads through heartbreak to healing." The house settled around me with familiar sounds, and somewhere in the creaking of old wood and whisper of wind through roses I heard her answer, "No, dear one. Thank you for being the granddaughter who showed up, the woman who chose love, the mother who will pass it forward. The story continues in you." I climbed the stairs to where Thomas and Charlotte slept, my family, by choice and chance and the grace that weaves them together. Tomorrow we'd wake to another day of tending what we'd grown. But tonight, surrounded by the legacy of Sunday visits and stubborn love, I rested in the certainty that we'd already won everything that mattered. The Victorian stood guard over our sleeping family, its walls holding not just our present, but our promise to the future that love is stronger than greed, that showing up matters more than showing off, and that the best inheritance anyone can leave is proof that broken things can be rebuilt into something beautiful. And in the garden, Grandma's roses bloomed out of season as if celebrating the family that had finally learned to bloom together. To everyone reading this, have you ever experienced a moment when family showed their true colors over money or inheritance? Sometimes the greatest gifts our loved ones leave us aren't material possessions, but the clarity to see who truly values love over profit. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs to remember that real family is built through presence, not presents. Like and subscribe for more stories about the complex truths of family, the power of showing up, and the inheritance that really matters, the love we choose to give and receive. Thank you for joining Holly's journey. May you find the courage to build the family you deserve, whether by blood or by choice. Remember, the best inheritance you can leave or receive is proof that love always finds a way. Until next time, keep showing up for the people who matter. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply be there Sunday after Sunday until love wins.